Catherine, how are you?
I'm okay.
The mic is, I'd give it a 6 out of 10, 7 out of 10 today.
My mic is offended.
You need to seriously, you need to get an iPhone.
And stop shilling for iPhones.
Catherine, you don't have an iPhone?
No, she uses an Android like a pleb.
Nick, stop judging me.
Oh my God. An Android.
Yeah.
It's the flagship
How was,
model.
Nelson, how was the space yesterday with, I think it was Robert Malone?
Oh, Robert Kennedy. Oh my
Oh,
God.
Robert Kennedy, my bad.
Mario, man, I wish you could have come in, but I know you had a space, man. It was insane. Nick came on the tail end, but I mean, dude, a lot of the information being dropped was mind blowing, brother. So it was great.
It's great, man. Ian, nice profile photo.
Thank you.
I was adding you to the space, and I'm like, I see Ian. I'm like, is he suspended because it's not coming up? I'm like, oh shit.
Now,
I
wait a
know how
minute.
you look
Isn't
like.
that just the same profile photo, but it's black and white?
No, it's a different one. I just took it like yesterday. Thank you, iPhone.
Oh, so we got another.
Androids can take pictures too. I'm just saying.
We got another 7 minutes for the drop. Is that correct?
That is correct,
Yep.
yes.
Someone-
Assuming he's on time, which I do not expect him to be because he's never on time.
What do you expect this one to be, Ian?
Honestly, I don't know. Like, I mean, it could tie into the whole Facebook thing that came out yesterday. I don't know if you're paying attention to Michael Schellenberger, but
I saw,
the
yeah.
Facebook files are out, basically. The Facebook files. We might want to go over those as well. They were disclosed in the lawsuit
Yeah, maybe.
with Missouri.
I think. Yeah. Can you maybe kick off let's give it another few minutes, and then maybe you can kick off in like 4 minutes.
Yeah.
The face. Oh no. What about we do the Twitter files in 7 minutes because there's not much time.
We do Twitter files first,
and then we'll read the
afterwards we
Facebook
can talk
files.
about that. Yeah, I think maybe have your
Yeah.
look
But can
over
you give
them.
us like?
Yeah. My suggestion go.
Have you read them yet?
No, I've not. There's a lot of it to go through, but Michael Schellenberger has like a few tweets on it. So check his Twitter account. He should have some preliminary information on it.
Yeah, that
I've
Missouri
got
lawsuit is a blockbuster for this issue. It's going to be, I mean, this thing is just starting to explode. I think keep pressing it, maybe get some real light on things and get people to understand what the heck's going on here.
Can you tell us a bit more about the lawsuit, Jim? Jim, can you hear me?
Yeah, I got it. Sorry, I just didn't mute.
Yeah. Can you tell us a bit more about the lawsuit?
Yeah, just a little bit. The Missouri Attorney General was actually a lawsuit to try to get very similar information to what we're seeing in the Twitter files related to cutting people off, and so they actually got discovery. I mean, that's kind of where it's at. I don't think the lawsuit's completed yet. Maybe you know that, Ian, and I don't. But
No,
it's
still
not
ongoing.
completed yet.
It's only discovery right now.
This is just stuff that came out of discovery, which is, by the way, just as good as whatever the outcome of the lawsuit is. Because what we're finding out is that everything that we're seeing in the Twitter files it's almost identical stuff with Facebook. It doesn't have quite as much depth as we're getting out of the Twitter files, but it indicates that what we already, I think, suspect, that the same thing's going on over there as what's been going on here.
Yeah, but a bigger deal, actually, because I just read one Facebook thing, but a really huge deal to me was that it said that instead of censoring for misinformation, first of all, it's the White House, and the directive that they gave is to censor or shadow ban or boost, whatever you want to call it, actual true information that leads to vaccine hesitancy. I think that's quite a significant thing because now they're not even looking at misinformation, but true information that they acknowledge is true, but that does not serve a particular agenda, whether you agree with it or not. And I think that is a pretty significant difference. So worth noting.
Yeah, so this is an example of agenda based. So it's no longer misinformation now. It's you don't have to disagree with the agenda to disagree with the concept of agenda based censorship. Because let's say the agenda is, even if you agree with the agenda, when does it get out of control? Who determines what that agenda is? So it's fascinating. So you're referring to the Facebook files, correct, Catherine?
Yeah, exactly. And it ties back to the conversation we had yesterday in the space, which was about that noble lie, because in their minds, they may well think, well, this is for the best. We get as many people vaccinated, so we save lives. And so we want to decrease vaccine hesitancy. So we want to block this information. But, in the process, they are blocking true information. That's a distinct difference.
And again, it's being quasi or absolutely anywhere between quasi directed or absolutely directed by the White House. Now, this is a severe violation of the First Amendment. There's nothing anywhere that should be allowed from the federal government to do anything to put a prior restraint on speech of any sort, either implicitly or explicitly. And that one thing that Catherine's referring to was an explicit direction and cooperation with Facebook on that matter. So, and by the way, one thing to throw in here, don't forget that no one quite knew the depth of what this situation was at Facebook when Mark Zuckerberg on Joe Rogan's program mentioned that the FBI had come to them. He kind of sort of nebulous. In fact, when you listen to what he said there, it sounded like he caught himself and pulled back a little bit. Well, now we know that it was a very deep issue. Like the coordination was deep, substantive, and regular. And that's a real problem. That takes freedoms away from people.
Well, I'd
Well,
like
in the
to
White
put in
House.
another. Sorry about that, Kat. I'd like to push it in another direction too, because we all know Pfizer was buying ads on TV. They were basically investing in lots of marketing. And as far as I know, I think that they bought ads on Twitter as well as on Facebook and were heavily invested in it. But then furthermore, when it goes to the White House, weighing in and leaning on people to basically be censored about all this information, at least the vaccine hesitancy, the White House spent $5 billion in taxpayer funds to subsidize vaccine doses, all of which came from Pfizer. And Pfizer was a key stakeholder in that. Johnson & Johnson wasn't given the same consideration. Moderna wasn't. It was Pfizer. And most of the censorship comes on behalf of Pfizer. So it's all circular. Whether or not you believe it was altruistic, whether or not you believe that people in the government thought that they could save, the world by doing this, by getting people vaccinated, they're the financial motive that ended up going back to the White House using taxpayer funds to censor one of our First Amendment rights on what is supposed to be a platform or avenue for free speech, especially in a time where we're locked down.
Go ahead, Nelson. Well, I was going to bring up, I think that's a really strong point, Malcolm. But one thing I wanted to sort of ask Jim about is, and yourself as well. I dropped
the
drop.
It's about Russiagate.
Oh, shit. All right. Ian, you ready?
Yes. You've already got 22 tweets on it, so he just...
Yay!
Oh, there you go. He did it. Is that all of it, you think? Or he's going to be more of it, but he's just dropping it in big bulks?
I think he's dropping them in chunks.
Yes.
Let me,
All right, let's kick it off, Ian.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll let you prep.
Yeah.
Prep yourself. Catherine, I'll let you finish what you're saying as
continue.
Ian prepares to read it out for us.
Through the thing right now.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. So, I'll just say this. So with the White House, they were pretty transparent from the very beginning, because I wrote about this, that the White House was, issuing these requests to the different social media platforms. And, a lot of people were perfectly okay with that. So where is this a violation of the First Right Amendment for them to be doing it if it's sort of voluntary? And it's kind of the same issue with the Twitter files, where these agencies are going to these social media platforms as well, and if they're not saying, well, you have to do it or else, I personally think the threat is sort of implicit, but legally speaking, I do wonder what basis for lawsuits.
So you think they were careful in not asking those social media platforms to take action, but they're like, hey, we recommend X, Y, Z. But
right,
we did see from previous Twitter files that it went a fair bit beyond just recommendation, and it was, I won't say coercion, but Ian, you remember, Ian, when we were reading through them, and it
There
was
was
like
coercion.
constant follow up.
There
So
was coercion there,
yeah, so
like a like
the
a like unspoken coercion. Essentially, there was first of all there was monetary benefit. They were paid $3.5 million to do the whole RussiaGate thing. That was a stipulation there. And furthermore, I mean, there was the State Department, which its organization, I forget exactly the name of it, was leaking information to the press to make Twitter look bad, to make all these social media companies look bad by feeding bad information to the press, right, about the instances of Russian disinformation campaigns. Now, none of that was true, but it didn't matter because these publications like NBC News would run it. And that would force Congress to start pressuring social media companies and threaten to take away their Section 230 protections. That was extremely dangerous for these social media companies. They had to act, otherwise Congress would
But
clamp
can
down on
it
them.
stand in court? I
It
guess
was
is the question, right? Because I agree with all of that. I think the threat is completely there. It's just, can it have a legal
I
basis
don't think
is the question.
the legal, I mean, I don't think it's a legal issue. I think this is something that Congress has to deal with. That's what, the church style committee is about, right? The one that was just founded to deal with the three letter agencies and their, suspension of free speech and social media. That's what the whole thing's about. So, I mean, we're going to find out in the coming months, like what can be done about this, right? This has to be a bipartisan committee. This can't be something that is just, Republicans, because that means it's very easy to shut down because it needs support from Democrats as well. And fortunately, there are Democrats who are concerned about this, right? I forget the guy's name, is the New York guy, who is what's his face? You know who I'm talking about. The one who spoke out against censorship online, right? Like Roe, yeah, that's a Roe something. He may be on the committee, and that'd be a good thing. Anyway, I'd like to start yeah,
Rokana.
Rokana, yeah, that's it, yeah. I'd like to start reading the
yeah,
Twitter
I'll let you
files.
kick off. Yeah, I'll let you kick it off for you. Say this.
All right, so it's I think it's about 40 long, 40 tweets long.
Can you hear me first before you kick it off, Ian? Can you hear me
Yeah, I can
fine
hear
or
you
no?
fine. Yeah, don't switch your phone or anything. It's perfect. All right, so number one thread, Twitter files number 14, the RussiaGate lies. One, the fake tale. So, it looks like there's like a part one of this. This is a multi-part release here. So, the RussiaGate lies. One, the fake tale of Russian bots and the hashtag release the memo hashtag. At a crucial moment in a years-long furor, Democrats denounced a report about the flaws in the Trump-Russia investigation, saying it was boosted by Russian bots and trolls. Twitter officials were aghast, finding no evidence of Russian influence. Quote, "We are feeding congressional trolls." Quote, "Not any significant activity connected to Russia." Quote, "Putting the cart before the horse, assuming this is propaganda/bots." So Twitter was pushing back against this, and this was an email sent by Twitter to, let's see, I'm going to zoom in. It was sent to the Honorable Dianne Feinstein and the Honorable Adam Schiff. And the email is dated January 26, 2018. And it reads as follows. Dear Senator Feinstein and Representative Schiff, thank you for your letter regarding the trending hashtags and concerns over Russian disinformation efforts. Mr. Dorsey has asked me to respond to the issues you have raised. Twitter is deeply committed to protecting the integrity of the democratic process, and we value Congress's interest in understanding the role of social media in Russian disinformation efforts. As we have indicated previously, Twitter has conducted an extensive inquiry into Russian interference in the 2016 U.S. election. We also continue to strengthen our fight against malicious automation and coordinated efforts to manipulate the Twitter platform. As we have also indicated previously to Congress, our work in addressing such activity has yielded significant progress over the last few years. For example, as a key component of this work, Twitter has established a dedicated information quality team which focuses on enhancing the strategies we use to detect and stop bad automation, improve machine learning to spot spam, and increase the precision of our tools designed to prevent such content from contaminating our platform. With respect to our analysis and particular hashtags, we welcome the opportunity to share with the committee some initial findings on this issue. And this is the part where he highlighted in yellow. He writes, we performed a preliminary analysis on the available geographical data for the tweets of the hashtag release the memo. Our initial inquiry based on available data has not identified any significant activity connected to Russia with respect to tweets posting original content to this hashtag. And there's an email that was sent by, I'm not sure who exactly, that was sent to Colin Krull and to Lauren Culbertson at Twitter, as well as Carlos Monge and Nick Pickles. It reads, I think Lauren is right too. He's putting the cart before the horse and assuming this is propaganda / bots. Could you tell him that our very preliminary assessment is that much, if not most of this, is organic activity, and ask him to please let us understand the facts before jumping ahead to addressing how to remedy it. So, yeah, they were kind of upset with Congress for basically jumping to the conclusion that there were Russian bots. There's none.
And what year was this, Ian? Because my
2018.
Bluetooth cut out for a bit.
2018. This was in January 26, 2018. And my cat keeps playing with me. Matt Taibbi continues. Twitter warned politicians and the media that they not only lacked evidence, but had evidence the accounts were not Russian and were roundly ignored. So Twitter was ignored. So on January 18th, 2018, Republican Devin Nunes submitted a classified memo to the House Intel Committee detailing abuses by the FBI in obtaining FISA surveillance authority against Trump-connected figures, including the crucial role played by the infamous Steele dossier. And this is an unclassified document that was sent by Devin Nunes. Do you want me to read this whole thing? This is quite big, and I think this is
No, I don't think. I don't
unnecessary.
think so. What we could do is we could read it at the end and summarize it.
Right.
Like we could read it ourselves internally and summarize
Yeah,
it for the
essentially
audience.
this is stuff that's already public, right? This is stuff we already know about how Devin Nunes submitted a classified memo to the House Intel Committee about basically FBI abusing its, powers to surveil Trump and his people. Like, I think they wiretapped the Trump Tower, for instance, and, that turned out to be a bust, right? It was all based on the Steele dossier, which, as we now know, was a hoax. So Matt Taibbi continues. He says the Nunes assertions would virtually all be verified in a report by the Justice Department Inspector General Michael Horowitz in December of 2019. That's why, after they went after Trump, they found that none of this added up, right? It didn't make any sense. Nonetheless, national media in January and early February of 2018 denounced the Nunes report in oddly identical language, calling it a joke. And he posts 4 screenshots here. One's from MSNBC, which has what's her face, Joy Reid, saying that saying 2 ex-DOJ officials on Nunes memo, a bad joke. The Hill reported by an article, something that was Andrea Mitchell, who's a commentator, saying Nunes has turned the House Intel Committee into a joke. And an opinion piece on the Washington Post written by Greg Sargent and Paul Waldman says the Nunes memo is out. It's a joke and a sham. Right, so they all have the same thing, and then there's an article, I'm not sure from where this is. It says ex-RNC chairman rips the Nunes memo for the joke it is. The Onion is mad that you're stealing their material. So like everybody was on the same page. Basically, these are like Intel committee people, Intel community people who are putting out the same message just to shut down the Nunes memo. We now know that it was not a joke and that Nunes was completely correct. So on January 23rd, 2018, Senator Dianne Feinstein and Congressman Adam Schiff published an open letter saying that the hashtag, quote, gained the immediate attention and assistance of social media accounts linked to Russian influence operations. This is a pretty long email, and it's kind of illegible. Like, I can't actually zoom in. It's not properly posted, but you can find it on Dianne Feinstein's page, where the title of it is Feinstein Schiff request Twitter and Facebook to conduct investigation of Russian bot activity in the hashtag release the memo campaign. This was basically their way of shutting it down, right? And Matt continues, he says, Feinstein and Schiff said the Nunes memo distorts classified information, but note they did not call it incorrect. And the screenshot here says, specifically on Thursday, January 18, 2018, the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, or the HPSCI, majority voted to allow members of the U.S. House of Representatives to review a misleading talking points memo authored by Republican staff that selectively references and distorts highly classified information. The rush decision to make this document available to the full House of Representatives was followed quickly by calls from some quarters to release the document to the public. So they didn't like the fact that the public wanted this released, and they claimed that the Russians wanted it released. Now, obviously, there was no Russian involvement in this at all. This was simply a lot of conservatives, and I would suppose libertarians on Twitter saying, hey, release the memo because we want to read it. Number 10, Connecticut Senator Richard Blumenthal followed suit, publishing a letter saying, we find it reprehensible that the Russian agents have so eagerly manipulated innocent Americans. And again, this is another pretty illegible screenshot here, but it's also something you can find on Senator Richard Blumenthal's website. So Feinstein, Schiff, Blumenthal, and media members all pointed to the same source, the Hamilton 68 dashboard created by former FBI counterintelligence official Clint Watts under the auspices of the Alliance for Securing Democracy, that's ASD. There's a screenshot here. Basically, they're all pointing to the same source, calling it Russian disinformation, and it goes as follows. It says hashtag release the memo is now a top trending hashtag among Russian bots and trolls on Twitter and other platforms, according to the German Marshall Fund's Hamilton 68 website, which tracks Russian influence campaigns. Quote, I have never seen a single hashtag that had this amount of activity behind it, said Brett Schaefer, an analyst who helps to run the Hamilton 68 dashboard, a project for the Alliance for the Securing Democracy at the German Marshall Fund. It tracks about 600 accounts that it says are tied to Russian-sponsored influence and disinformation campaigns, and most of these accounts were promoting the same meme on Friday. Hashtag release a memo is a top trending hashtag amongst Twitter accounts linked to Russian information operations, according to Hamilton 68, a website launched last year that says it tracks Russian propaganda in near real time. So these are like 4 different articles. They're all kind of saying the same thing. They're all quoting the same guy. 3 emails from Blumenthal, Schiff, Feinstein, and media members, all basically regurgitating the same point, claiming that it's Russian disinformation, although Twitter itself can't exactly find any sort of evidence that it is, right? It's literally a think tank that is making this claim that it's Russian disinformation. And of course, it's a Democrat think tank. Let's be clear on that. So Matt continues, he's in number 12, he says, the dashboard, which featured a crude picture of Vladimir Putin deviously blowing evil red Twitter birds into the atmosphere, was vague in how it reached its conclusions. This was produced by the Alliance of Securing Democracy. They literally put out agitprop, right, trying to say that Vladimir Putin's behind this whole thing. Now, inside of Twitter, executives panned Watts, Hamilton 68, and the Alliance for Securing Democracy. 2 key complaints. Hamilton 68 seemed to be the only source, and no one was checking with Twitter. No one cared what Twitter had to say. This was just Hamilton 68 saying something, and everybody else running with it. The media, politicians, and so on. Quote, I encourage you to be skeptical of Hamilton 68's take on this, which as far as I can tell is the only source for these stories, said Global Policy Communications Chief and future White House and NSC spokesperson Emily Horn. She added, it's a comms play for ASD. So basically, even, people within the Democrat ranks are a bit iffy about this whole thing, right? And the email says, thanks both. This is a comms play for the ASD. They've made a very strong media push last week, piggybacking on Clint's testimony. We should have a separate discussion about if, when, and how we confront ASD privately with our knowledge of their flawed methodology and dashboard, and seek to help them reorient in a more accurate direction. Or do we address it in our response to Schiff and Feinstein? This was sent by Emily Horn, who I guess now works for the White House, but like at the time she was pretty concerned that Twitter didn't know really how to respond to these politicians. And in an off-the-record email, she said, I encourage you to be skeptical of Hamilton 68's take on this, which as far as I can tell is the only source for these stories. Hamilton 68 does not release the accounts that make up their dashboard, so no one is able to verify the accounts they include are in fact Russian automated accounts. And number 2, it is extraordinarily difficult for outside researchers who do not have access to our full API and internal account signals to say with any degree of certainty that an account they believe is behaving suspiciously is 1, automated, or 2, Russian. If you speak with them, I encourage you to press on how they can be sure that both of these claims, when they do not have access to the internal signals and data. So like these people were just basically making shit up, right? They're just making shit up.
Schrodinger's Russians.
Yeah, Schrodinger's Russians, right? Everybody's a Russian. You disagree with them, you must be a Russian. Number 15. All this swirl is based on Hamilton, said the Trust and Safety Chief Yoel Roth. And here's the email that he wrote to a bunch of Twitter employees. He writes, another thought. Is now the time to go public with the fact that any given user counts once towards a trend? Given all the swirl around hashtag release the memo is based on Hamilton, Hamilton 68, which is based on a raw tweet count, we'd be able to broadly refute it without actually sharing anything too sensitive. I suggest something along the lines of, we've built many protections into our trending algorithms, including one only counting any given user once towards a trend. Tweeting repeatedly would not cause a topic or to trend. So, like, essentially, if you tweet a million times to do a single topic, it's not going to trend. It's only going to count as one. We saw approximately X unique users tweeting with this trend for whom the average number of tweets posted were Y. Most users posted fewer than Z times. A small number posted more than U times, often in violation of our spam rules. We successfully caught and hid V of these tweets before they ever affected the conversation on Twitter. So, like, they were trying to figure out a response, a way to respond to this. And he added, we continue to invest in IQ, including TweetDeck change to limit tweeting from multiple accounts and expanding detection of duplicate and coordinated activity across accounts, etc. So you're just trying to deal with spam here. Number 16. Quote, if ASD isn't going to fact check with us, we should feel free to correct the record on their work, said Policy VP Carlos Monge. And this was, that company, right, the think tank. If they were not going to fact check, then we need to go public and correct the record. Roth says that he couldn't find any Russian connection to the hashtag release the memo at all. Quote, I reviewed the accounts that posted the first 50 tweets of hashtag release the memo, and none of them show any signs of affiliation to Russia. Quote, we investigated, found that engagement as overwhelmingly organic as driven by VITs, or very important tweeters, including WikiLeaks and Congressman Steve King. So, like, literally, these are real accounts that were tweeting about this hashtag. This wasn't some product of Russian disinformation campaigns. This is literally real accounts tweeting about it. WikiLeaks tweeted about it. So in his email, he has a TLDR where he says, Schiff and Weinstein released a statement calling on us to investigate the ASD or Hamilton 68 claims as Russian bots, driving the hashtag release a memo, blah, blah, blah. Same thing. And that communications getting media queries and released a memo on last Friday when ASD issues a press release saying this hashtag was driven by Russian bots. We investigated, found the engagement is overwhelmingly organic, driven by strong big real accounts, including Donald Trump Jr., Steve King, WikiLeaks, and a bunch of others. Right? That was the result. So there was no Russian bots here. And a staffer, number 19, a staffer for DIFI or DIFI, Weinstein, agreed that it would be helpful to know how Hamilton 68 goes by the process by which they decide an account is Russian. But only after Feinstein published her letter about Russian influence. So this clown, this idiot, Dianne Feinstein, goes and publishes a letter claiming that there's Russian disinformation. And then afterwards, she's like, well, can you actually prove it's Russian disinformation? So she already made the claim based on nonsense. And now she wants evidence that it's actually what she said it was not bullshit. Ridiculous. Number 20, when Twitter spoke to a Blumenthal staffer, they tried to wave him off because we don't believe these are bots. And the email reads as follows. To a smaller group, the Blumenthal staffer called because he wanted to send a follow-up letter to the DIFI/Schiff letter, that's Dianne Feinstein, right, saying that hashtag release the memo is Russian bots. Twitter should do another user notice to these victims. We had a real conversation. One, I tried to wave him off of this particular storyline because we don't believe these are bots. Two, I said that Twitter spent a lot of resources to respond to the initial requests, and the reward from Blumenthal shouldn't be round after round of requests for user notice. It also doesn't do anything to fix the problem. This distracts our team from the real IQ fight. Number 3, I thanked him for reaching out and said that I understood his bosses were looking for their next press hit, and that I would ask the team if there is something easier they could ask for. I'm not sure what he will do, but offer to chat again if you wanted feedback in the next iteration of their thinking. So that is number 20. Number 21, added another.
Before continuing, Ian, I just think, as I saw a lot of people join,
Yeah.
so far from what you've read, because I know it continues for a while, how would you summarize it for the audience?
So to summarize it for the audience, I would say that, a bunch of senators, Dianne Feinstein, Adam Schiff, and Richard Blumenthal, basically put out press statements blaming Russian bots for trending, for causing the hashtag release the memo to trend. Now, there is no evidence that this was Russian bots. Twitter itself investigated and found that there was no evidence whatsoever that any of these things were bots. This was done organically by Donald Trump Jr., by, Steve King, which is a rep, and by WikiLeaks and a whole bunch of other people. Like, I believe I might have even tweeted into it. And they were citing a single source, which was called Hamilton 68. Hamilton 68 is a think tank that essentially claims without any sort of merit, without offering any real evidence whatsoever, that all of this stuff was done inorganically by Russian bots. And they tried to get the release the memo thing shut down, because the release the memo thing was basically Devin Nunes' full memo disclosing how there was no Russian collusion into the Trump campaign in 2016. So people wanted to see the full memo, right? Like what his investigation found, and the Democrats, these people in particular, wanted it suppressed. So they tried to silence it by claiming it was Russian disinformation, that wanted it out there, that wanted that information out there, that nobody in their right mind would actually care about this information because this is all Russian disinformation, and it was just a way to try to suppress the conversation on this very memo. And as it turns out later on in 2019. The Devin Nunes memo was correct, that Trump was exonerated for all the claims that, they claimed that he was a Russian disinformation operative or whatever. All that was, disproven later on. So that's my summary of so far. Yeah.
Kim, did you hear the summary? How are you? Good to have you back.
Yeah, I'm good. I'm just catching up. I didn't realize this came out, so let me read through it and then I join in.
It just came out. We're up to 21.
Yep.
We're going to continue reading through it, but I'll let you catch up with it and then just join us back.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I'll continue reading. It's not long. If we get through it, we can get it through it fast. Another staffer at Twitter wrote, "It might be worth nudging Blumenthal's staffer that it would be in his boss's best interest not to go out there because it could come back and make him look silly." This is another Twitter staffer. Basically, Twitter knew this were not bots. They're trying to tell everybody, look, they're not Russian bots. This is a real hashtag. But, these idiots were not intent on listening. Number 22. One Twitter executive tried to negotiate, implying an undisclosed future PR concession if Blumenthal would lay off on this. Quote, "It seems like there would be other wins we could offer him." So, they were willing to do some quid pro quo here with these Congress people, these members of Congress, these senators, and so on, right? Because they wanted a PR win. These guys want to show that, oh, look, we're taking action against the Russians, but there's no Russians. It's nonsense, and it makes Twitter look bad. And then what happened was in 23, Blumenthal published his letter anyway, so he didn't listen. 24. Executives eventually grew frustrated over what they saw as a circular process, presented with claims of Russian activity, even when denied, led to even more claims. They expressed this explicitly to Blumenthal's camp, saying that Twitter has spent a lot of resources on this request, and the reward from Blumenthal should not be round after round of requests. We can't do a user notice each time this happens, right? This is they're pretty pissed off at Blumenthal for basically, just causing endless disruption of the company. Number 26. Eventually, Twitter staff realized that Blumenthal is not looking for real and nuanced solutions. He just wants to get credit for pushing us further. And this is, again, another email. It says, Colin may have much more to say, but based on my experience with him, Blumenthal isn't always looking for real and nuanced solutions. He just wants to get credit for pushing us further. And he may move on only when the press moves on. So it's a self-feeding problem here. So ultimately, Twitter executives talked about feeding congressional trolls and compared their situation to the children's book, If You Give a Mouse a Cookie. Wow. Okay, so this has become, if you give a mouse a cookie, ... with members of Congress, it's a children's book reference. That's what Lauren Culbertson wrote in her email to other Twitter staffers. They're basically really tired of these people, right? You give them one thing, and they ask for more. You give them an inch, they ask for a mile, right? That's the idea. So Matt Taibbiasi explains in the story, if you give a mouse a cookie, he'll want a glass of milk, which will lead to another wave of exhausting requests. And at the end, he'll want a glass of milk, and then one more cookie, and then one more glass of milk. And it just never ends. It never ends. Now, the metaphor for the endless Russia requests was so perfect, one executive wrote, "I'm legit embarrassed I didn't think of that first." Number 30. Despite universal internal conviction that there was no Russians in the story, Twitter went on to follow a slavish pattern of not challenging the Russia claims of on the record. So members of Congress would go out there and say, "There's Russian disinformation," and Twitter would not actually rebut them publicly. Privately, they'll be like, "Yeah, there's no Russians here." But publicly, they'll be like, "We're doing our best to cut down on the Russians," and there's literally no Russians. No, it's all made up. So, 31. Outside counsels from DC-connected firms like De Beauvoir and Plimpton advised Twitter to use language like, quote, "With respect to particular hashtags, we take seriously any activity that may represent an abuse of our platform." So, they gave them legalese speak. It's a long email. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I'll read a portion of it. Basically, they gave them the language to give, to basically try to soften Congress, to try to soften the press. And so they'll say things like, we appreciate Congress's leadership on this issue and agree that understanding the role of social media in Russian disinformation efforts is of utmost importance. With respect to particular hashtags in your letter, we take seriously any activity that may represent an abuse of our platform. Our initial assessment indicates that these trends are driven primarily by organic, non-automated activity, if true, but we are continuing to analyze the data, and as part of our commitment to transparency, we will inform Congress about what we find. So, they have to suck up to Congress as a result of this. Now, Matt Taibbi writes in 32, he says, as a result, reporters from the AP to Politico to NBC to Rolling Stone continued to hammer the Russian bots theme, despite a total lack of evidence. And he cites 4 articles here. One is on the AP. It says, Russian Twitter accounts push hashtag release the memo conservative meme. Researchers say. It's always the researchers, experts, right? Another one, goes on to repeat the same thing. U.S. News says, nail in the coffin for the Nunes memo. The Democratic response to the GOP memo and the FBI surveillance adds new details to the case against Nunes and the Russia investigation. And the one in the Rolling Stone says, release the memo. What's the conspiracy behind the right-wing meme? And it's more nonsense, right? It's just more nonsense. Got a terrible picture of Devin Nunes, make him look like a clown. It's like, okay, you guys are just running bullshit. So Matt Taibbi explains, Russians weren't just blamed for hashtag release the memo. They're also blamed for the Schumer shutdown, for the Parkland shooting, and for hashtag gun control now. All the different hashtags to quote-unquote widen the divide, according to the New York Times. There's no evidence they actually participated in any of these hashtags, but this is what the New York Times reported, claiming, citing, again, that organization, Hamilton 68. So with regards to the hashtag Schumer shutdown and hashtag release a memo, the internal guidance was both hashtags appear to be organically trending. This is stuff that people were tweeting about, because why wouldn't they? They were happening. But however, as Matt Taibbi details, NBC, Politico, Associated Press, The Times, Business Insider, and other media outlets all played up the Russian bot story, even Rolling Stone. And they all declined to comment for this story. So, when he reached out to them, he's a real journalist, okay? Matt Taibbi is an actual journalist. He reached out to all these guys, It's like, hey, you want to offer some comment? Who told you to write this? None of them wanted to respond.
Yeah, so Ian, that's the bit that really stood out to me. How many of the media outlets, including AP, didn't...
Your mic is
your mic is off,
your mic is really bad,
God. Yeah, none of them
we
wanted
can't
to
hear
respond.
anything.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Better?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll continue.
No,
Where are we up to now?
We're up to 30
that's the bit
seconds.
that stood out to
We're
me
almost done.
was the media.
Almost done. We can talk
Cool.
about this shortly, yeah. Let me finish it. So the staffs of Feinstein, Schiff, and Blumenthal also declined to comment. So he reached out to comment for all of them. They didn't want to say anything. But who did comment? Well, Matt Taibbi reached out to Devin Nunes. He commented. And he had a quote here from Devin Nunes, who told Matt Taibbi, said, quote, Schiff and the Democrats falsely claimed Russians were behind the release the memo hashtag. All my investigative work by spreading the Russia collusion hoax, they instigated one of the greatest outbreaks of mass delusion in U.S. history. Fucking perfect. I'm retweeting that right now. Number 38. This hashtag release the memo episode is just one of the many in Twitter files. The Russiagate scandal was built on the craven dishonesty of politicians and reporters who for years ignored the absence of data to fictional scare headlines. Right? They basically made shit up to scare people into following a certain narrative, into giving up their freedoms. This is what they do, right? This is what they do. And Matt Taibbi says for more, watch Schellenberger, Barry Weiss, Ellich Fang, David Zweig, and more. And Twitter has no editorial input on this story, and the searches were done, carried out by third parties, so the documents could be limited. So there's probably more stuff there, but this is what he had access to, and this is the report. So this is the conclusion of this report. It's a pretty good one, I would say. It's a pretty good one. Basically, there are no Russian bots. There was never any Russian bots in any of this. They made it up. They made it up.
So is Barry Weiss out of the doghouse right now?
Yeah, I would assume so. Yeah, still out of the doghouse.
And for my, I think Twitter did enough to resist the request by the White House.
Absolutely not. No, they didn't do enough. They
Nope.
basically just fell in line. They were like, well, we can't do anything. We don't want to do anything. They didn't have the balls to do it. They could have very easily said, no, this is nonsense. But they never publicly...
The public statements...
I actually made a tweet about it.
The public statements they put out actually furthered the narrative. It actually played into their narrative. So it was great. Twitter did fall right in line.
Yeah,
It's
that's what
funny
I was
though.
trying to. That's what I was trying to say, Nick. It was like they're basically reinforcing it by making more of a fanfare. Exactly, and I'm surprised that some of the media outlets that Ian listed didn't even want to remotely comment on it. That was the main thing that stood out for me, to be honest, throughout this whole thing.
And by the way, I think it's worth noting here that as this thing progressed on, all the way up around the point where Jen Psaki was from the from her position in the White House, still saying that they were talking to social media companies related to the COVID thing or whatever. I mean, they began to be so confident in their approach to this that they felt they were going to get by with it in perpetuity. And we know from their public statements that their the determination in government to totally participate in this process of working with social media companies to shut down speech that was politically inconvenient for them and detrimental to political prospects. I mean, this is really, really a deep problem.
Jim,
Can
to
I?
your
Well,
point there,
No,
though, this was after 2020, though, after the election. And we're to assume they've already had FBI meetings, contacts, and, as that Emily character said, they've already steered Twitter in a positive direction. And so they've already got the people that they need to sow the narrative and keep Twitter's mouth shut in place. Like, this stuff is happening during 2018, back when they were basically usurping power.
Well, and in
I
And
fact, it
feel like
goes even
Twitter has
further back
taken
than
so
that. So
much
don't
heat.
forget that all the way back in 2017, we eventually got the Susan Rice memo where she was talking about the meeting they had on January 5th when they were going to, that they needed to do everything by the book, that they were expressing caution. She was sitting down with Barack Obama and James Comey, John Durham, and Biden, talking about we're going to do everything by the book, but we also have to be really careful just in case when we're working with the new administration, there might be some Russian connection or whatever, and be cautious and all this kind of stuff. They were actually setting in place, it seems, in that meeting, all of this narrative as it played forth, including the effects on social media, because the FBI was already involved with some of that process up to that point as it is. So this thing was baked in the cake all the way back to 2016.
Catherine?
I'm impressed. Can I say,
Oh,
I'm
go ahead,
impressed.
Jonathan.
Yeah, I'm impressed with the files. However, when you guys summarize and say there's no Russian bots, that's like saying there's no American bots. Every state act in their interest and put misinformation out there to try to get the populace up and going. So when you guys are summarizing saying there's no Russian bots, that's hard to believe. It seems that's a stretch. It
Well,
seems a bit
well,
So the
right.
absence
But
of
the
evidence
idea of
is
this,
not evidence of absence, right? I understand what you're saying, but at the same time, the absence of evidence doesn't mean there is evidence that they're there. Okay? You get what I'm saying? Like, you can say that.
yeah,
I get what you're
Yeah.
saying. I get what you're saying, but I mean, if you guys boldly said, proudly said that there's no Russian bots, and you lost me there.
But not in this
And you got to
case.
realize
There was
this is
no evidence that there was any Russian involvement in these threats and these trends, right? Like
yeah.
this
Just
was
listen
promoted
to
by
what.
Donald Trump Jr., by Steve King, by a number of conservative influencers. Are all of these Russian bots? Clearly not. So, there was no Russian involvement in this particular issue that they were claiming there was direct Russian involvement when there was in fact zero Russian involvement in any of this. That's the issue.
and what makes it more egregious is that even behind the scenes, Twitter, who has the analytics, and they even outlined this in the files, no one got Twitter's inputs. But Twitter had all of the analytics on this, and they were telling them, "Hey, we can't prove they're Russian bots. Are you sure you guys don't want another, convenient win or something?" It's like CYA, like, guys, if you keep going with this, we cannot cover you. Do you not want to run a different narrative? So that tells you it wasn't actionable. Russian interference was not enough of a salient threat to justify any of these measures, but they kept pushing in it, and we see they basically closed ranks and got Twitter to play along, and eventually they kept this narrative going, even though the citation source was Steele Dossier and Hamilton 68, a Democratic think tank.
And by
But
the
Do
this
way,
we
was
let's
know
happening
let's
that
during the
make this very
administration of
these
clear.
45.
government
Sorry, go ahead, Catherine.
do we know that these government, just to play devil's advocate, do we know that these government agencies were certainly not sending any evidence back to Twitter, or were maybe had something that they were not sharing with Twitter for security concerns, anything like
No, this
that?
was all Hamilton 68, and this is who they were quoting. This is who the Congress people, the members of Congress, and the media were all quoting this one think tank, this bureaucratic think tank. They were the sole source of this information. There was nothing to validate it from the FBI, the DIA, or the DHS, or anything else. Right? This was one
Like, I'm having
organization.
a hard time believing that because, like Jonathan said, I mean, we know that Russians absolutely do engage in these practices. This has been confirmed on the Russian side and so on. So they do. And so the idea that they, like, the fact that they can't find that, I do find it a little bit strange, in these requests. So
Sloppy.
I'm
What I
actually
mean,
wondering why they can't find it.
because
Well, hold on, hold
because
on.
Can I
people.
can
That's
I
not what
chime
they
in on
said at
that
all.
real quick?
Yeah.
All right. So Twitter in this release and in the previous release have made clear that they were looking really hard. They were under pressure. They wanted to find the Russian bots. They wanted to find what they were asking for. So they were looking everywhere, and they couldn't find it because it didn't exist.
Maybe this Kyle, I think, works at the. I don't know if Kyle has any experience with that.
Carol, what's your thoughts on what Catherine is saying, Catherine and Jonathan? Like, do you think there are bots that didn't find, but like, it doesn't move away from the point that even if there is bots, they,
Yeah.
the White House couldn't prove it, Twitter couldn't find it, and yet we saw, we saw the narrative that was pushed by the senators that there is bots, even though it wasn't proven. Maybe there is, but it doesn't exist until it's proven. But Kyle, Catherine, and Jonathan make a good point. Like, is there potentially bots that they didn't find? And
Well,
I don't mean like
honestly,
I wouldn't say like a handful of bots. Like, I'm sure everyone uses bots here and there, especially pre-Elon. But like, bots that had at least a minuscule amount of influence
Mario,
on
they had
policy.
all the tools, right? So they can data mine their own
That's right.
database. They have the IP addresses of users. They can do context searches. They have the kind of tools that we don't have. Those are administration tools. And they had the motivation to find them and couldn't find them. So if they couldn't find them, the only clue that you can get from all of this is that the Democratic side was pushing this narrative over and over, from Russiagate to Russian bots to Russian election interference. And at least on Twitter, there was hardly any evidence of that at all.
And in fact, they just admitted it in this drop that they found Russian bots. They said it was insignificant. If you look at number 3, the highlighted section of that memo in the first attachment to number 3 was, our initial inquiry based on available data has not identified any significant activity connected to Russia with respect to tweets posting original content to this hashtag. So let's be honest. I don't think anybody's saying Russia doesn't get involved in certain ways in social media to try to move a narrative. I think what we're establishing over and over again with all these drops is the fact that whatever state actors are trying to do such things or any other similar thing is frankly insignificant to the overall conversation that is happening in our electoral process for 2 reasons. One, they can't necessarily dominate it. And 2, if they tried to truly dominate, if they really had a chance to totally spam bot everybody everywhere, no one would believe it anyway, or at least not in a significant form, and only temporarily if they did do it. That, I think that's what we're establishing very clearly here. The bot narrative is stupid because it doesn't relate to the overall way that this thing has been playing out and the way it played out, Devin in particular.
Kyle?
Yeah, thanks. So I think Jim's right, but that doesn't mean that Catherine and Jonathan are not. When we're talking about this kind of stuff, like Russia's a good boogeyman. It's what we go to is something is happening that we don't like. Why is it happening? Let's talk about Russia. And we have similar boogeymans when you talk about things that are going on domestically, whether it be white supremacy. I just actually tweeted out something. It's going to end up being anti-government, anti-authority is going to be the new one you'll see coming out this year that they're going to blame everything on. But we're talking about like the go-to boogeyman. And so even though that is the case, 2 things can be true at once. Yes, the Russians get involved. Yes, the Russians are, running all of their types of information campaigns that happen in the United States. As Jonathan pointed out, they'd be foolish not to. Every state actor is going to advocate their own position. And as Catherine pointed out, they may be doing things things on other fronts. But to assume that these fronts align, that the Russians are somehow, coordinated with this particular, hashtag in particular, which is what we're talking about, whether the release the memo hashtag was influenced by Russians. If the evidence is not there, as Kim accurately pointed out, they have all the tools to find it. They have all the motivation to find it. They've been prepped and kind of, they've been kind of honed by the FBI to be looking for these kind of things. And if those things don't happen, then it's not there. I just want to do one kind of point of clarity. This is pointed at Jonathan, but I think it applies to all of us. If we're going to use the new fake words, and I think they are just kind of fake buzzwords of mis and disinformation, disinformation is deliberate. So that would be something that is involved in statecraft or, this sort of information campaign. Misinformation theoretically would involve people accidentally sending information that is incorrect, that they don't know is incorrect. I think they're both, BS words. I think they're both nonsensical, and they're kind of driving an info campaign. But as we play in this kind of arena where we're using those terms, there's a specifics to them. I don't know that it matters all that much, but just to be precise, that was out there. So I
before we go to Tom, I just want to ask the audience, bottom right corner, that purple button, the comments. Can you put your comments there? I'd love your thoughts on what you just read in the Twitter files today. I want to go through the comments a bit. Tom, go ahead.
Thank you, everyone. I hope everyone's doing well. Good to be with you as always. The Democrats had a problem. Devin Nunes figured out that they abused the FISA process, broke the law, and lied in order to investigate and subpoena and spy on then candidate Trump and President Trump. The worst abuse and scandal in terms of politics and corruption and misuse of resources against a major candidate or president in American history. So to address that problem, they needed to suppress his information. And in order to suppress the information, they manufactured fake information about Russia involvement in questions about their corruption. And these Twitter files expose that it was a lie, but it didn't stop the media from echoing the lie in order to justify suppressing and questioning the Devin Nunes memo. And, and it's not an innocent lie. It's not just politics, because when you falsely accuse American citizens of being an agent of a foreign power, you place the safety and freedom of those Americans at risk. And it's not academic, because then we saw there were fake investigations and prosecutions targeting people like Carter Page, Michael Flynn, and the President of the United States based on these lies. And when I'm tweeting out, release the memo, and U.S. senators behind the scenes are suggesting I'm acting either as a witting or unwitting agent of a Russia disinformation campaign or intelligence operation, unacceptable.
They sent an innocent woman to prison, Maria Butina. She's a Russian citizen, right? They sent her to prison over this nonsense. Now,
Over what exactly? What were the allegations?
the allegations is that she was spying on America and feeding the Trump campaign the sorts of campaigns of disinformation. Turns out it's false, right? She was freed, just released. Now she is in Russia. She's an MP in the Duma. Interestingly enough, she's a spokeswoman on RT. She got a job there after she was released. But guess what? She's still innocent. She didn't do all the stuff they claim she did, and so they put innocent people.
She was released. She was released because she was innocent. Like they announced that she was innocent.
Or they couldn't really go after her, right? This is just nonsense to try to implicate Russia in all of this, and they went after an innocent civilian, essentially, right? Put her in jail for it, and they went after Americans. How many Americans were tried for this garbage? Ask General Flynn, right? General Flynn. They nailed him.
How many?
Before going to Catherine, I've got here a message. Paddy got a comment. Twitter, and there's Mel saying, "Tom, you just nailed it." So the audience is agreeing with you, Tom. Paddy saying, Twitter wanted Russian bots to be real. The government wanted Russiagate to be real. And then we've got another person, Ian, I'd love to get your thoughts on it. Noel Hoig says, this seems to be worse than the other Twitter file drops. I wouldn't go to that extreme, but would love your thoughts on it, Ian, before going to Catherine.
I would say, yeah. I mean, it does contribute to the greater whole, right? The greater whole being the whole Russia collusion narrative. That never happened. That was manufactured whole cloth by the Clinton administration and was continued, perpetuated by the Biden administration. To this day, they talk about Russian disinformation campaigns, about Russian bots, and they use it to suppress free speech. That's all
Is
there.
it still part of the narrative now?
Absolutely. They have not walked back
Absolutely.
on
Well,
it.
let,
Very
let
much.
me let me give you guys the bigger picture here. Clinton was supposed to win. A war with Russia was on the books. Trump delayed the whole thing by 4 years, and they used the time while Trump was president to create this narrative, Russia bad, you know? And I knew there would be a war with Russia when I saw what they did with the WikiLeaks release, because I was involved in that, and I know those weren't Russian spies that provided the information to WikiLeaks. So when you look at all of this, it was really a setup to manipulate the minds of American people that, Russia is the bad actor, is interfering in elections, is hacking politicians, and is doing all this bad stuff, because they needed to create this narrative, because they knew they're going to be at war with Russia. And the reason they knew is because they plotted this coup in Ukraine. They knew and worked for many, many years after that happened.
Euromaidan.
The Maidan. After that, for many, many years, they worked with Ukraine to train the military, to provide them with arms, because the plan was to take over the Donbas and Luhansk and those areas. So Ukraine was preparing for a major military operation to take these areas back, plus Crimea. So the US knew sooner or later the Russians are going to do something about that. What they were thinking was they're not going to do anything about Donbas, but once it comes to Crimea and their military base there, that's when they thought the Russians will act. But Putin acted sooner. He said, we're going to have this conflict anyway, so we're going to have it at our timeline when we want, and that's why they went in earlier with the special military operation. But everything that happened in the US, anything to do with Russiagate and everything that happened after, was really just the preparation of the narrative that Americans will agree to a war with Russia.
And
So
by the
can I
way,
hit
that could
real
come
quick
in.
before we go on any further? Oh,
Well,
sorry about that.
Yeah,
Go ahead. I'll let Catherine, Jim. I'll just let Catherine go ahead first because she tried to speak earlier, and then
yeah.
we'll go to you, Jim and Malcolm.
Yeah, because first of all, I think to say that Russia has had zero interference or any kind of actions that were bad faith actions in the U.S. is completely inaccurate. They have had lots of they have espionage operations, they have infiltrations. Those are proven and recorded. So that is incorrect. And Russia has been an active player in this for a while. So the U.S. may need a narrative. I don't know, Kim. There's maybe some elements of truth to that. I'm not going to necessarily argue with that. And as much as I am very suspicious of Russia, I come from that part of the world. I see the media. I can understand the language. So there is some access that I have that I can see what's going on there. That I think people are often missing. But I think we need to go based on evidence. In this particular Twitter release, if they're trying to tie it into a particular hashtag and they are lacking the evidence, fair enough. But that doesn't mean that there aren't other interferences. And I think we can't ignore that. I think what's interesting, though, in this particular, as I'm kind of looking at the Twitter files, over and over again, I think we started almost as Twitter being the villain in all of this. And I think to me, what has sort of emerged is much more, the extent to which government organization or even the White House, especially with what came out just with Facebook, to which extent they play a role. And I think to me, and I don't know if audience point of view has changed on this at all, as to who's really, at fault here, or who takes more responsibility in this particular situation. But that's where I'm at with this.
So, Catherine,
Malcolm, Jim?
just real quick,
Go ahead, Jim.
of course, Russia spies on the US and the US spies on Russia. This has been going on for decades, right? There's no surprise behind that. But when you look at Russiagate, which is now completely disproven, when you look at the Russia narrative that has been built up over many, many years, and you look at the developments in Ukraine and this war with Russia, it all fits perfectly together, doesn't it? I mean, it's not a conspiracy theory when you really look at how they have built up this animosity with Russia. And also don't forget the intelligence.
Well, Russia has also done it very well on its own.
Well, if you look at, for example, what the motive is for this, the deep state, the intelligence community, they need a boogeyman. Otherwise, they can't justify their budgets. They can't justify their increase in powers, in spying tools and all that. So as long as they have a boogeyman, they can make more money. They can, use more tools against people around the world to spy on them.
Are there no other boogeymen? I mean, Russia's not the only boogeyman. We have many boogeymen who are real boogeymen out in the world.
Yeah,
So I don't think Russia's the
I'm not
only.
saying this, but the job of the CIA is to constantly create chaos and create these boogeymen in order to justify their inflated budgets and their crazy wars that they want to fight around the world. They always need a boogeyman to justify these endless wars and the growth of the deep state. So that is what this is all about.
Malcolm?
Yeah.
I'll go to Jim. Go ahead, Jim. His mic is dead.
No,
Go ahead, Jim.
I'm good. I've said what I want.
Okay.
No, I
Kim,
meant
well, he
Jim.
was talking about me. Yeah, so Kim has got an excellent beat on this, but I just want to add on to that just a little bit, because let's not forget this Russian narrative began with Hillary Clinton's campaign. Hillary Clinton is a bridge from the Cold War to the present political situation vis-a-vis military action and clandestine operations in the United States. So Catherine talked about, but aren't there other boogeymen in the world? Well, yeah, there are. And frankly, interestingly, China is definitely one of those. But what got burned into the American system after the Cold War is this anti-Russia narrative, which after the whole Yeltsin situation and the reemergence of corporate powers that kind of it led to Putin coming into power. We had a brief pullback from that in the 1990s during that situation. But once Putin started getting back in power, then you already had this burned in idea in American geopolitical efforts that Russia was a threat. It never has been a threat since the end of the Cold War, but it kept it up for this boogeyman thing that Kim is talking about. He's 100% with that. Now, newer generations coming in, and that's going to get burned in a different way. When Dwight Eisenhower was talking about the problems of a military-industrial complex, I mean, this is the guy who was one of our most prominent military leaders in American history, not the best, but prominent. And he saw from the inside and out what was going on. And he had the courage to say, this is turning into a problem. Well, that problem has remained ever since. So there is a narrative that certain people in areas that are connected to contractors that get billions of dollars from the U.S. government to be able to maintain that cash flow, because it becomes very important. And the last point I'll make to that is that I was noting when I was working on Capitol Hill, we were talking about the fact that 7 of the 10 wealthiest counties, this was in around 2011-12, 7 of the 10 wealthiest counties in the country surrounded Washington, D.C. Now, the reason for that
Tom?
I want to address Kim's point. I want to highlight something that the media is inexcusably ignoring. To use the term that the lawyers use, these Twitter files are admissions against interest when it comes to Twitter. So these are extraordinary disclosures because they, in my view, increase the legal liability in significant ways for Twitter. And, Musk is to be commended for, risking and, potential, lawsuits and other things against his company because he thinks it's in the public interest this government collusion and corruption be exposed. And so this isn't someone making an allegation and you can say, there's no credible information here. Now, these are corporate documents authorized for release by the head of the corporation who is ratifying their authenticity in dramatic ways on Twitter. So I would highlight that and further expose the media failure to delve into these is it really inexcusable. But with Kim, who is one of the smartest folks on this platform, raises some significant issues. But I would just differ a little bit. I'm not suggesting that going after Russia doesn't benefit some of these agencies who have an interest in escalating conflict or allowing conflict to continue that might otherwise not be there. But with this specific effort, it had nothing to do with it. When Russia is useful for the left politicians involved here who are corrupt, they will support Russia. When Russia is not useful, they will attack Russia. Remember, Hillary Clinton, at the time of announcing the Russia reset, was on the take from Russia. Joe Biden, through his family and Hunter, was on the take from Russia. Bill Clinton himself was receiving a cash payment to speak to a Russia government front company. And of course, we have the countless millions funneled into their operations, the Clinton Foundation operations by Uranium One. And then the election rolls around and they literally have a Russian operative on staff to help create this fake story against Trump. So all of this is not done, in my view, by at least these instant politicians we're talking about, Clinton, Obama, and the Democratic senators, because they're thinking forward the way Kim suggests. Maybe that was helped along by people within the government who are happy to have this as an excuse to advance their separate agenda. But the principal reason behind these lies is to attack President Trump, try to jail him, while at the same time distracting from the fact that they were actually doing and had done everything they accused Trump of doing, which is taking cash in exchange for favors and trading their public office in ways never seen before in American history. And we now have a president who has been implicated 6 ways to Sunday, even though the media won't admit this, in financial improprieties with the Russian governments and their fronts. And remember, Burisma, we say Ukraine. Burisma was not, quote, on the Zelensky side of the scale in Ukraine. It was a Russian leading company. So they're up to their necks in Russia corruption here in this administration. And so that's why else would they go so desperate to censor Americans who are highlighting this? It's not because they're worried about war. They don't care about war. They care about keeping themselves out of jail and keeping themselves in power.
Tom, let me give you a little bit of background here. The reason why this war with Russia was inevitable since 2008, 2009. After the financial crisis, Russia and China came together and said, we need to change the global financial system. We cannot rely on the US anymore to be the steward of the financial system because its own rules have led to this major financial global collapse. And they decided to create BRICS. They brought in the initial 5 founding countries, and their goal was, in their statute from the beginning, to change the financial system to not be reliant on the US dollar as a reserve currency. That was the direct threat against the hegemony of the US empire in the world. When the US doesn't control the world currency anymore, they can't endlessly print money, and they can't keep this incredible debt machine going that basically funds this entire military industrial complex, right? So when they announced that, and it became a direct threat to the power of the United States globally, and basically in a unipolar world that we were in at that time, by announcing this multipolar concept with a new world currency, that is when everything was set in motion to isolate Russia and China. And this is why we are today in this enormous crisis with, the war in Ukraine, with a potential war in Taiwan. I mean, everything is set up for this major war simply for the US to try and stop the destruction of its power. And that is exactly the threat that comes from Russia and China. And now we have 17 nations that want to sign up to BRICS. They control 40% of global GDP and 50% of the population of the planet. The threat is real and is accelerating, and this is why the US is putting the struggle into everyone's minds with Russiagate, with Russia bad, with China bad. This is the reason, the background behind it.
I guess I could argue a little bit, or I would argue significantly with your theory of the case, Kim. And I guess the point of my last comment was to suggest that your theory of the case and my theory of the motives here aren't necessarily at odds, but in fact could be complementary. And, there's many motivations behind why bad politicians behave badly. And I would just highlight the simplest explanation is that Trump was a threat. They were implicated. How do they protect themselves?
I agree.
I'm not suggesting that you're wrong. It's just that there's one way of thinking about it, and there's another way of thinking about it, and they all should be considered. And they're not all necessarily at odds with each other, and there's some truth there to all of these analyses.
And before going to Jonathan and Nelson, go ahead, guys.
Yeah, first of all, Kim, listen to me. I've been listening to you, Kim, and I think we all need to get together and do a GoFundMe and send some flowers over to Russia, because it sounds like Russia's the victim here, and it's like we're doing nothing but Russians sympathizing on this stage. How Russia has been the victim. How our bad actions from some politicians have put Russia in a bad light. And I just sitting here listening to this. It blows my mind that, and I know you're not here in America, but there are some people on the stage in America that, are sympathizing for being Russian sympathizer. I mean, Ronald Reagan would turn in his grave if he heard us having these kind of conversations. I understand what you're saying, but I think you guys are taking it a bit too far. Russia is a bad actor. Okay. They're our biggest foe. I mean, them and China, Russia and China is our biggest foe. Okay. Russia does not want anything good for us, the U.S. So therefore, we should not want anything good for them. But on this stage, everyone is saying Russia is a victim, and I just can't, man. I don't understand that.
I want to intervene here, Mario, if I could.
Let me just.
I want to intervene. Garland just announced the appointment of a special counsel to avoid a probe the Biden classified documents, which is just further will add to the hurricane here in Washington, D.C. over what started off, in my view, as a radical abuse of Trump. They threw out the rule book to go after Trump, and that rule book no longer protects Biden, who did things arguably worse than Trump is alleged to have done, even under what I think is their fake theory of the case.
Tom, do you have any confidence in the Biden DOJ investigating themselves
No,
or
sir.
investigating
Well,
the
this is why
administration?
they appointed a special counsel to mitigate the lack of confidence in the fair administration of justice in this area. I mean, you had this unprecedented rate of Trump. I mean, I don't want to digress too much from the topic of this, but, what struck Judicial Watch initially about this was we had asked for the National Archives to get records from Bill Clinton, who had kept them after his presidency. There were recordations an author made of him calling foreign leaders and members of Congress, quintessential presidential records. And the court came back to us, the archives came back to us, and the Justice Department came back to us and said, you have no right. And by the way, the president has ultimate authority to decide what is personal and presidential. And if he has records after he leaves office, they're presumptively personal. So
A
I
question
don't
for you,
need to.
Tom. Someone on
The
the panel.
point is they changed the rules to go after Trump all of a sudden. And now every president and vice president is on the block, as Joe Biden is showing, because of this political case, not based on law or precedent against Trump. What a
Right.
nightmare.
Right. And the biggest difference worth noting here, just to be clear with everybody, is the president does have the ability to declassify anything he wants to. But Tom, correct me if I'm wrong, but the vice president does not have that ability, do they?
Well, the president has inherent authority to declassify records. The vice president, the statutory authority is a little bit unclear. But with respect to presidential records, the vice president has the same power as the president does to designate records as presidential or vice presidential and personal. And that necessarily presumes and includes classified records. So if indeed these records were taken with him after he left the vice presidency, he should be treated the way I think Trump should have been treated. But of course, they're not following my rules, right? They've made it all up. So under the Trump theory, under the rules they set out for Trump, Biden has even more risk, criminal risk, because his ability to declassify records is only limited under the included under the Presidential Records Act. He doesn't have any separate authority like the president has as commander in chief. It's a nightmare. But when you want to break the law or break apart the law, I think it's a better way to say it, to target your political enemies, that law isn't there to protect you when you're caught doing the same thing. And, the question is Biden ever going to be treated the same as Trump in this case? It's a significant development that a special counsel's been appointed. But, to me, this is just highlights the absurdity of the situation we're in. I mean, if I'm Obama or Pence or Quayle or Bush or, frankly, the estates of Clinton, Ford and Reagan and George H.W. Bush or even Jimmy Carter and company, they should all be worried about what documents they have, because this administration changed the rules to target Trump, and now all bets are off.
Not true. Quite different. I'll wait till my turn, but you're way off on this one, bro. Way off.
Okay, let me chime in
Do you
here
want to
real
quickly
quick,
respond? Go ahead.
just to get back on topic, Tom, real quick. This is the Democrat DOJ. They didn't do anything about the Hunter Biden laptop. They didn't do any investigation about any of the stuff that came out, 10% for the big guy and all this other stuff. Nothing is going to happen to Biden or to any, major Democrat politician with this DOJ. It's all politicized. You know this. I know this. So we don't really need to dwell on this. To Jonathan's point from earlier, that Russians are the bad guys, there isn't really anything good about Russia that can be said. That is exactly the result of years of propaganda, Jonathan. And I want to explain this to you, so give me 1 minute. Russia wanted to join NATO after the Cold War was over. And it was refused because if Russia would join NATO, there wouldn't have been an enemy that the US deep state could have used to justify their budget. So they needed to keep Russia on the bad side. Russia wanted to be a partner in the EU. They saw themselves as part of Europe, and they wanted to join that as well, and were shut down. When Germany reunited, the West gave Russia a promise that NATO will not expand 1 inch eastward. And they completely lied about that. And that's all the leaders of the West. Britain, the US, Germany, all the big countries were basically telling Gorbachev, if you give us the reunification of Germany, we are not going to expand NATO. And they lied about that, right? So Russia is, in a way, the victim of all of these lies and betrayals. They wanted to be part of the West, but they needed to keep Russia a boogeyman in order to keep justifying their spy budgets, the CIA, the power grabs. That is why they didn't want to have any closeness with Russia.
Kim.
Before Jonathan, you reply. I'll let you reply, Jonathan. I just googled it while you were speaking, Kim, and I didn't know this. So Putin. So this is by an ex-NATO head, and he says Putin. So I'll quote exactly what he said. They wanted to be part of that secure, stable, prosperous West that Russia was out of at the time. So Putin, when he first came to rule, he wanted to join NATO, but apparently, according to him, he didn't want to stand in line with, quote, a lot of the countries that don't matter. That's according to a former Secretary General of of NATO. Go ahead, Jonathan.
Well, actually, let me just clarify that. So Putin had a meeting with Bill Clinton and said to him, "Look, the Cold War is over. We want to be allied with you guys." And he asked him directly, can we join NATO? And Bill Clinton just turned him down, and it never happened. But it just shows you, most people don't know this. They don't understand. If the US would have agreed to that, there would have been no conflict, no war. Russia wanted to be part of the alliance. They fought together against the Nazis, and they won together. They wanted this whole thing to be over and be part of the family. And the U.S. didn't allow it.
Jonathan?
Yeah, you said, I'm going to go back when you said, when Gorbachev allowed the reunification of Germany, Soviet Union was in shambles. They were broke. They had nothing. Okay, Lithuania, all their nations were breaking off. Gorbachev didn't give permission for that. I just want to put that out there because once again, you're making these guys sound magnanimous and like they've been taken advantage of. They weren't taken advantage of. They were weakened and they were broke. All right.
If Russia didn't want the reunification of Germany, it would have never happened. They had tanks in East Germany. They had an army in East Germany. This was done because the EU and the US promised that there would be no expansion of NATO, and Russia saw this as a peace agreement, basically.
Yeah, well, as I was saying, so when we speak about Russia, because the way you're making it seem is Russia has been taken advantage of. Russia is a bad actor. The United States, unfortunately,
Can
we
you
are bad
define what a
actors as
bad
well.
actor is? Like, how exactly is Russia a bad actor when it's literally trying to do everything in its power to be on America's good side?
It's not exactly honoring some other accords like the Budapest Accord, where Ukraine.
Exactly.
It's funny because people are, they're quick to dismiss the Budapest Accord in terms of Ukraine gave up its nukes for certain agreements, right? And people are like, well, they gave it up because there was never any kind of agreement put in place in official documents. But when there was some sort of an agreement with NATO not expending back in the days of the dissolution of the USSR, that suddenly qualifies. So I don't get the dissenting point of views.
Catherine, if your measure is the breach of international treaties and international law, the U.S. is far ahead of Russia when it comes to that. If that is your measure, then Russia is a quiet little lamb compared to what the United States has been doing around the world.
Well, but look, we can't continue saying, well, that because the U.S. is bad and does these bad things, then Russia, I'm talking about Russia in this particular case, and we're comparing these two very specific things, and people are giving, one they're ignoring, and the other one they're saying, well, no, NATO expense should be honored. I don't get that.
Would we? I wouldn't put any country in a basket of good and bad. Obviously, some are leaning more towards bad. You could, argue North Korea's in that basket, and you can argue, countries like Finland are leaning more towards
and I don't
the good.
think Russia
but I wouldn't
is bad,
say.
By the way, I do want to clarify
I don't think.
that.
But I wouldn't put any country in such a. But I wouldn't put any country in such a binary position. Not the US, not Russia. It's always more complex than most people would like it to be, and it's harder to understand. That's what I've found. But Nelson, you've been waiting for a while, man.
Yeah, Mario, I definitely agree with you, and it was good to see Jonathan here. But I mean, Jonathan, listen, you're doing exactly what the mainstream media is doing right now. You're doing exactly what the left is doing right now, deflecting from the main point, right? Deflecting from the issues at hand, right? Listen, my question to everybody in this room: where is the outrage from the left? Twitter file on Twitter file on Twitter file. Where's the outrage? I'm seeing nothing on mainstream media. I'm not hearing any of these senators come out to say anything. I'm not hearing anybody acknowledge this. I'm hearing the left, quite frankly, change the narrative and shift the narrative every time we confront them with this, like, my brother Jonathan Bing, right? So it's absolutely ridiculous. In addition to Tom's point, this is criminal. This is beyond criminal at this point. This is insane, right? How many Americans were silenced, discredited, financially impaired for going
Literally
against the
arrested.
grain or speaking against a false narrative which was sold to the American public, right? This cost Trump his loss in 2020 and ultimately led to the economic downturn we're facing right now. That we're all facing, by the way, left or right or whatever, middle. We're all facing this right now on all sides. Right? This is beyond criminal. I mean, if Madoff, listen, this makes Madoff look like freaking Santa Claus. But there's no outrage from the left. Jonathan, listen, bro, I love you, but you've been brainwashed to the point of no return. Catherine's my girl, so she'll see the light sooner rather than later. But you, oh my God. I mean, listen, guys, criminals are criminals. Criminal activities are criminal activities, whether they're from your side or my side. Acknowledging that is the first step towards preventing our government from ever being able to repeat this in the future. But we have to acknowledge it, not deflect from it, not change the narrative, not bring up some other bullshit. We have to confront it, acknowledge it, and move on. Right? So once again, Catherine, you'll come around. But Jonathan's gone. that brother is gone. But let's talk about it, though. Let's talk about
Well, I will
May
say
I
one thing,
respond?
Nelson, just to respond to one thing you said specifically about media coverage from the left. I do agree that it is sad for me to see, that as somebody who has written for these, very mainstream media outlets, I do find it very sad to see that, the coverage is very, very, very biased in only one way. And, I did a little experiment. I approached a bunch of very mainstream media outlets and I tried to pitch the story to them, from a bit of a different angle and just to see what happens. And I was met with, complete crickets. And this is, I have very high credentials. I write for all those kinds of outlets. And I literally got not a single response. So that says a lot, because they can't kind of say, hey, we don't have anybody pitching stories from a different angle. They just ignore it. So that says a lot, sadly.
Why
Can
why would
can I
these?
respond?
Sure, go ahead, Jonathan.
Yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Now, you guys are saying that the mainstream media is controlling the narrative. Okay, the problem with these Twitter files, the reason I believe it's not getting as much press, is Elon Musk. Okay, you've never had a social media, someone that runs a social media company, go out, okay, and say vote for one party or the other. All right, there may have been some biases, but they weren't vocalized. Okay, and then if you wanted to have coverage, release everything. Don't just selectively release what you want out there, because I'm quite certain there's some things out there, okay, that is horrible for both sides. Release it all. Don't play games.
I
Don't
said,
drip it out.
so on this point, Jonathan, I'll let you continue. On this point, I said the same thing a while ago, in the early phase. I'm like, yeah, they're probably releasing to fit a certain narrative. But then they explicitly said that the back door for censorship was available for both sides of the aisle. However, Republicans either never used it or Twitter just never really opened that door to them, just because Twitter's bias is kicking into the, supporting the left. So I agree with you. Maybe there are more documents, but what if they are releasing everything? Maybe this is everything, and
Let me just correct
it
something.
just goes against.
Let me just correct something real quick, Jonathan. In a way, Elon is releasing anything, and the Twitter files are not over because those journalists that have access to the database, they can search freely for anything. And then what the lawyers of Twitter do, they have to review what the journalists want to use to see if there's any legal implications, if there is something that could hurt Twitter or Twitter employees or create legal issues. And once these things are cleared, the journalists can use that. So just to be factual here, Elon has opened the door to all Twitter secrets.
So, Jonathan, the notion that the mainstream media is not covering this story or any stories about the Twitter file because Elon Musk, may say that, he wants to vote for Ron DeSantis in Florida or something like that is just absolutely, it's ludicrous. It's ludicrous because, what you're looking at right now is, you've got the Washington Post writing stories back in 2018 about the whole Russiagate situation. Okay. They're winning Pulitzers for it. They won a Pulitzer for, actually, I think Catherine, me and Catherine were talking about this the other day. But why just based on this objective information that is being released, internal documents from Twitter, why does Elon Musk's political ideology have anything to do with it? Especially when you have somebody like Matt Taibbi releasing the information, who is by no means a conservative, not at all.
Well,
And he'll tell you that himself.
Unfortunately, he is seen as a conservative. And I'm not saying that's the right wing or is
It
accurate
just
at
seems
all,
unbiased,
but
though. They're just painting him as a conservative so that they can shut him down. The same way they can call
yeah,
Russian disinformation
that's correct.
operative
But he's
to
being
shut the person
painted
down.
that way for a while. And
Well,
the thing is, well, I just want to clarify one thing is that, because my criticism of the of the Twitter files was originally that it wasn't given to sort of, let's say, like a group of people who were on sort of different aisles. But from my experience now, kind of looking at the mainstream and how they ignore it, like I'm actually not convinced anymore that they would have even wanted to cover it. So I don't know if it's valid criticism anymore, to be honest.
Well, actually, so keep this in mind. The mainstream media, as we call it, and I don't know how much I like that term, but I'm trying to make a distinguishment here. They were kind of in on this gig too. Let's not forget that. And we don't have the files that show it or whatever. But the point is that all the narratives, particularly with this Twitter files dump, all the narratives that the regular media have been throwing out there are consistent with what we're seeing were internal discussions to adjust what was being allowed to be said on this particular platform. And now with the Missouri Attorney General's things, we're finding out more and more about as that relates to Facebook. The regular media does not want to make themselves look bad because they were doing exactly the same thing in maybe a more overt way. But keep in mind here that there is, I want someone to challenge me what exculpatory evidence is going to be found in these files. One, two, especially in light of the fact that there is actually exculpatory information. Like what we first thought about Yoel Roth has entirely changed. I'm not saying, he eventually gave in to it, but we see very real pushback there. And the narrative that's being laid out there right now, and this is why I think that Taibbi and these others having full access to the files is significant and proves that this is useful information that we're getting that's not being biased in some particular way, because they were everybody was ready to find Yoel Roth to be the bad guy here. And every one of us now knows for a fact that the government agencies and actors within those government agencies were the ones really driving this. So, could we find out more having all the files out there? Surely, that could enlighten us in one way or the other. But someone's got to show me how they're going to find something exculpatory here, or how you can make a claim that this is just some right-wing job. Matt Taibbi, Glenn Greenwald, all these people that are commenting on this, and certainly Barry Weiss and Matt Taibbi, these guys are people who were pro-ACLU type people who were that way because they believed in the Bill of Rights and the support of the Bill of Rights. That's the motivation coming from here, and they're
So
shocked.
before going to Jonathan, because I know he was trying to finish something, and then Tom. What he implied initially is that you think there's a lot of the same influence we're seeing with Twitter is not only there with other social media platforms, but with other media outlets as well. And it's just a matter of time that some of these companies change ownership, and we see similar drops as we saw with Elon's Twitter files.
100%. I mean, like, okay, like
Jo-
there is evidence that the media was colluding with these people. In the previous, one of the previous drops, we found out that NBC News was getting its information directly from the State Department. They were publishing what were essentially lies about this whole Russian disinformation campaign, citing insiders at the State Department, and then the State Department would literally use those articles as citations in their reports to Twitter to demand that they act on it. So they were like self-feeding it, right? Like they were feeding their own narrative, saying they would give information to journalists and say, put this thing out there, pressure Twitter, and then we're going to use your report to pressure Twitter based on, and that report is entirely based on what we told you to say. So there is 100% collusion between members of the media, particularly NBC News, AP News, and a few of the other ones that were mentioned in the article, I mean, in the drop today, that show that the media was working hand in glove with the government, or rather with the senators, and to perpetuate this narrative that Trump was, a Russian asset. That was what they wanted. That's what was being fed by everybody. And it wasn't just the government doing it. It was journalists not doing their jobs.
pretty convincing. It's a pretty convincing story. So Jonathan, I'll let you
It's
finish
just a
what you're
big
saying,
lie,
then going to
as
Tom
Trump
Dallas.
himself calls it.
And by the way, Adler, I've got David Adler, he's at the presidential palace. Hopefully he'll be able to jump in a bit. Just give us an update on the latest regarding the Biden files. Let's call it the Biden files. Jonathan, I'll let you finish what you're saying before going to Tom and Dallas.
No, I'm fine. I will address what Nick said. Nick, because of Elon's political leanings, he's saying, no, because you don't know what you're writing on. Elon may put something out there that's a red herring, and then all of a sudden release the rest of it, and it makes it, look like the media jumped to conclusions. That's why you can't report on something unless you have the full story. Okay,
But
and then Elon hasn't given everyone full access and the full story. That's the only thing I'm saying.
Jonathan, you're
Zuck,
completely wrong about
the
that. That's just not true. The
I know you said, Tim, I know you
Jonathan,
said that
look,
the
the Twitter files really speak for themselves. They are documents, right? They're emails in their own voices with their own words. You can't just minimize this and turn this into a nothing burger, which is what the mainstream media is trying to do. And let's just be frank here. The mainstream media today is literally just a propaganda department, primarily for the Democratic Party and for the deep state. They have literally taken over the media. What you are reading and seeing today in the news is not journalism. It's just stenography.
But by the way, let's not forget that in earlier file dumps, we know for a fact now that the deep state, the government, was working with the Daily Beast to shame Twitter into complying, and that they later were the ones who released the Steele dossier. So yeah, this cycle is all a part of this, and that's why you don't see the mainstream media doing
the
And,
mainstream media
closing, Jim,
also.
out.
and closing, Jim, I just want to say this: if Elon is so transparent, where's the Donald Trump files? Okay, because a lot of this took place during his administration. Okay, his administration had the reins from 2017 to 2021. All right, so where's the Donald Trump files?
Because he never
And
asked
where's
them
the
to do
request?
anything. How can there be files
Right.
for things or there's zero
Donald
But
evidence he
Trump.
asked them
Jonathan,
to do anything? Like, do you
you're doing
not
the same
think
thing they
that
did about
Twitter itself
WikiLeaks,
or
Jonathan.
Facebook or Instagram or Google or any of these other sites, do you not think that they would tell the world if Donald Trump asked them to censor somebody?
Well, let me just say this right here. All right. First and foremost, no one else has released this, only Twitter. That's first and foremost. And secondly, if Donald Trump that did not want to give up his power that he had, would not use that power, okay, that to go there and have Twitter do something, you guys are all delusional. And I say that
I didn't give
respectfully.
it up.
Hold on,
Wait. Do you
Listen,
not
we
think
have
that?
the Missouri files that show right now, the Missouri Attorney General released files that show other places where this was happening. 1, 2. Are you seriously telling us that Twitter would keep private
Exactly.
any similar requests from the Trump administration to do similar things, they'd have blown it out there themselves. Are you kidding me?
Every single thing that Trump ever did during his administration behind closed doors was leaked to the public. Every single thing. So they wanted him off the platform, years before he was actually kicked off the platform. There's absolutely no way that they would have kept that private.
Okay, we're
But
speaking in
Jonathan, making
absolutes now.
that
It's a leaky ship.
I'm gonna mute out because we're speaking in absolutes, and we're saying Donald Trump did not ever power that everyone else did. I'm done with it. All right, thank you. I mute out. I'll listen.
But Jonathan, like you're falling into the same trap that people do on so many issues, man. Like remember when the liberals like loved WikiLeaks because he exposed bad things about corrupt conservatives, and then he exposed things about Hillary and Camp, and then they go, well, where's the conservative stuff? He must be withholding it because he loves Trump. You're doing the same thing. Like Donald Trump has talked shit publicly about Elon Musk, number one, and if Elon likes Ron DeSantis, something bad for Trump would be good for Ron DeSantis. But again, like you're running distraction, arguing about why isn't there some proof of some evidence that you also yourself don't have proof of, to try to then, again, essentially punt to the second half to actually hold people accountable, which, again, you bought in and believe those narratives. These are people who are using a tactic, going after, in cahoots with intelligence agencies and using social media companies and traditional media companies to create fake narratives knowing that they don't have the info, trying to get companies like Twitter to produce info to support basically a fake allegation, hoping that they could, find evidence to support the crime that they're accusing. And again, like people like yourself, all you're really doing is you're doing one of two things. You're either changing the topic completely, or you're going into the argument of the absolutes, where you go, are you serious? So there's not one Russian bot. It's like nobody said that. The point is, what is the significance and what is the impact? And it's the same thing as the last Twitter files, where there's like $10,000 in ad spend against Trump and Hillary spending $400 million, and then people are still like, well, there you go, that's proof of Russian collusion. It's like, no, that's a drop in the ocean, and to focus on that means that you are not able to come to grips with programming and fake narratives that you yourself believed.
Dallas, what I'm
Trump
saying is,
administration was doing this the whole time because we're reading about it in the Twitter files. It's just that they were doing it clandestinely behind his back because previous administration and others in the so-called deep state were intent upon embarrassing Donald Trump. It was his administration that was doing this. If you want the evidence of it, there it is. It just doesn't turn out the way that you think it might, Jonathan.
Jim, all I'm saying is Twitter, we all can agree that Twitter became a tool, all right, for the government, all right? And to say that one faction of the government, one party, one executive branch, officer will use it and not the other, to me is just ludicrous. But it is a very powerful tool. And if you guys
But
are,
you don't have evidence that they used it. I mean, principled people do exist. You can't just make up claims and be
because
like, well, because everybody's
Elon's
corrupt, therefore, of course Donald Trump is corrupt. Of course he would use it. That is illogical. There's no evidence that he did anything of the sort. And don't you think that they would have blown the whistle on it?
because Ian,
the
where's
White
the evidence
House
coming from?
administration under Trump was extremely leaky. He could not fart without people reporting on it. This is a man who was followed night and day by his own staffers who were just aching to leak to the press because they didn't like him. Right? This is what.
Well,
he
you
faced.
also have. It's worth noting that Yoel Roth, the head of Twitter's Twitter safety, actually called Trump a Nazi publicly.
That's right.
And Yoel Roth overseeing this entire situation. I mean,
and even Elon has said that he would like to piss off the 20% that's on the far left and the far right. If he's not pissing off one or the other, that means he's not doing anything right. Right? That is his public statement. And he's not a hardcore Trump fan. He does not like Donald Trump. Both of them have publicly attacked each other. So this is not, there's no bias here. It's not like Elon's hiding the files to protect Donald Trump. And many of the journalists, even the ones who don't even like Elon, who are working with him on this to release these files, have stated publicly that Elon has had zero say in what they release. So this is what they found. And they found nothing on Donald Trump that would suggest that he would manipulate the narrative or try to censor people. Nothing like what you're suggesting.
So guys whose administration came up with the term alternative facts wouldn't try to manipulate the narrative. Okay, I'll go on to
But
the
Tom,
next
Jonathan,
step.
that's not really an
So
argument, man.
It's
Like
An
that's
argument.
Jonathan.
It's
once
not the
again
same
like
thing.
kind of
you're
like running
referring
away.
to a
Yeah, they're talking about about convincing the
Can I
media of
jump in
truth
here?
or the lie,
yeah,
whatever.
jump
But it's not the
in after
same
Ian,
thing
Tom.
as censoring people, as outright censoring people, which is what happened here. People lost their rights. People went to jail over this nonsense. Trump never sent anybody to jail for this. This is the government.
Well,
Tom?
the irony of this, to kind of just answer Jonathan's point initially, is most of the worst Twitter files are out of the Trump administration, where you had appointees of Trump or federal employees nominally um, who nominally report to Trump in theory, use their powers and abuse their powers to censor Americans, to either help protect their anti-liberty policies on COVID or to advance Biden's campaign and hurt Trump. So there's the irony there. The only evidence we had out of the Twitter files, and I think there was a specific look-see for what was coming out of the Trump White House, was a complaint about why President Trump's press secretary was suppressed, at least I think suspended at least for a period of time, or banned from Twitter. Secondly, in terms of the media is compromised in the sense that we're going to see, if we had an honest media, similar Twitter media files come out, whether it be New York Times, AP, or Washington Post, pushing this, and we'd find a lot of guilty parties here, and I think that kind of reflects in their skepticism here, or purported skepticism, because there, for the grace of God, go them when it comes to the FBI being caught pushing for censorship, or their cozy communications with leftist politicians and their allies, that based on nothing, that led to reporting suggesting that Trump and people support him were agents of a foreign power. The most, it doesn't get much more malicious than that, or reckless, if you do it without checking it out. And then, thirdly, it's the head of the company has ratified these documents. So the media has no excuse. I mean, they pretend, well, someone else is reporting on them, we don't see them. No, Twitter has released these documents. So when you have the CEO saying these documents show voluminous evidence of election interference by Twitter and its colluders, that alone is news and needs to be reported and dealt with with the headline interest that it is appropriate to revelations like that. And the fact that it doesn't have it happen just shows you, the corruption that I think Kim pointed out. I think these are activist organizations, many of these legacy media companies that sometimes do journalism. Heck, when it comes to investigating and exposing government corruption, Judicial Watch does as significant, if not more significant, journalism than many of these media companies, which at best too often are vehicles for leaks and gossip, as opposed to kind of doing the hard-nosed investigative reporting that I think Americans naively pretend that's what they're there for. It's not to say that they don't do it from time to time, but it's almost incidental to the political and narrative and activist pushing they pursue. Here we've got this incredible revelations that the National Security Agency, the CIA, the State Department, the FBI, HHS, DHS were involved in manipulating our elections and what we heard and learned about key candidates. And the collective yawn from the media, and frankly too many Republicans, makes you wonder how much longer the Republic will last in terms of the civil liberties and values that we all, love about this great country.
Can I add
Nelson?
one point to that, Tom? Is it okay, Mario? Real
Yeah,
quick?
jump in. Yeah, jump in,
Well
Nelson.
said,
I'll go with
Tom.
Nelson.
Well said.
Yeah. So think about that was super well said, Tom. Think about Russiagate, right? Think about the size and scope of that narrative got to. You had the 2016 election happen, and then you had basically a manufactured narrative come into play, which was Russia interfered and Russia hacked in the election to a level that could have affected the outcome. All of that was created and pushed on no evidence, and not even no evidence, manufactured evidence that we now know today was completely false and bogus. And they literally got people believing that, again, Russia changed the outcome of that election on no evidence. Then what happened? Then, as that went on, then it was like, well, look, all of Trump's actions are making it's because he's a secret Russian sympathizer. It's because he's a Russian puppet. And, no offense, Jonathan, there's a lot of people like you and, even family I've got who believe that, even probably till today, despite all of that being not true at all, right? And think about that. During the same time, again, in these emails, you've got people like Adam Schiff. That guy's lied publicly more times than you can count, claiming he's got evidence that's going to bury Trump, put him away, and the guy had nothing. The guy is a cover for deep state establishment actors who never gets in trouble. You've got Blumenthal, who's been his hand in every single fake manufactured story for the last 20 years in U.S. politics. You've got Feinstein, who had Chinese members, or Chinese spies that were, one was her driver and others were in her staff. Nothing happens, just gets swept under the rug. This whole plan and this whole tactic, this is just like radioactive tagging. So they did the same thing to their own. Look what they did to Tulsi Gabbard, right? Hillary Clinton calls her a Russian agent. She's in a debate. She does super well against Kamala. Google colludes to hide her website from view so that they can't actually run ads and capture that traffic. And they call her a Russian actor. Like this is a tagging that people believe over and over. And the thing that I find that I think a lot of people have to come to grips with, I think there's about a decent percentage of us amongst us who their default is to believe authorities and without any recollection that these authorities have lied to you countless times over the years. It doesn't mean that they're wrong 100% of the time, but if your default is to believe people who've continuously lied to you, then you've got a bit of Stockholm syndrome to deal with.
Nelson?
No, appreciate you, Mario. I mean, just trying to follow up on, the statements that Jonathan made, again, quite ridiculous statements. But, I mean, everybody knows that Silicon Valley is flooded with leftist loonies from top all the way down to the bottom. Everybody knows this, right? I mean, need I remind you guys that Twitter executives actually decided to remove Trump from this platform? Right. So, I mean, the statements in itself make absolutely no sense. I mean, the only reason why we're privy to this information is because Elon bought Twitter for fun. Right. He bought it for fun, literally. And he literally said when he bought it that he's not doing this to make money. And his investors know that as well.
He's charging $8 for blue check marks.
But
Nelson, that's not correct.
That's
I'm sorry, but
I mean,
Elon is doing this as a business primarily. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to raise all this money from these shareholders. So,
no, but that wasn't the way he painted it, though. We know that wasn't the way.
No, he
painted
actually
it,
did.
right?
Let me correct you there. He said he sees a bigger application called X App, where he's going to create a new financial company. He's going to embed other features, and it will be the highest profitable social media app. So just please don't say that he bought it for fun. That's not correct.
And he didn't buy it for fun. I mean, he himself told me that the reason he bought this is because he believes free speech is essential for the future of mankind. Without free speech, there's no democracy. There is no going to Mars or, getting off this rock, right? We have to elevate ourselves. And without free speech, without Twitter as a platform for free speech, none of this is going to happen. Humanity is doomed, essentially. And his neural network,
yeah, I'm
as
much
he
more
said,
inclined to believe Kim's
But
version than the free speech, because there's no free speech on Twitter. There's freer speech, but no free speech.
Yeah, I mean, but to the point of free speech, to Ian's point of free speech, right? I mean, free speech in some cases could be a detriment to, large corporations or the government that want to paint a certain narrative, right? So, I mean, I get what you guys are saying, but if it was solely as, a business that he's trying to increase the valuation, none of this would be happening right now, because this
Nelson,
pisses off a lot of powerful people with a lot of money.
There was no major platform that hundreds of millions of people
just a
used that
second
wasn't
here.
fully
So
captured. That was the problem.
credibility and free speech in a world where everyone is getting censored and the news media is unreliable is actually a really powerful, unique selling proposition. For Elon to do this, it's amazing advertising for Twitter, because why would you want to be on any of the other platforms that don't take free speech as serious as Twitter? It's, and for citizen journalism and all these features that are coming out for Twitter, what Elon is doing here, he's saying we are the better alternative to the other big tech companies that are going to continue to censor you.
Yeah, Kim, definitely agree with your point, but at the same time, brother, it's a great marketing tool for people, for the average person, right? For users, not for large corporations or governments who want to paint narratives, who thrive by painting narratives, right? So it's, I agree, but at the same time, it's I don't know. I
Well,
mean,
what
we just
Elon
have to wait to
wants
see
is
how
that
this
the
goes.
narratives can compete, right? He doesn't just want to have one narrative that's controlled by one political party. He is opening this up to a fair fight.
And that's why we have
The
these
free market.
roundtables right here. We try our hardest to get, an equal argument from both sides
Well,
without
all sides,
censorship.
right? I mean, it's a free market out here, and it just so happens that his views on capitalism, and he is a capitalist, make no mistake, do fall in line with free speech. There's no reason why these things need to be at odds with each other. If anything, capitalism benefits from having a free market. Without capitalism, without a free market, there is no capitalism. There's only monopoly, right? And that is
Ian,
what? Yes?
how is Elon? So I'm wondering, a question for you is like, how is it free speech on Twitter right now? Like I said, there's freer
How is
speech,
it?
but
So what's your what limitations do you see, Catherine?
well, there's still TOS. There are people being suspended. I just talked to someone who just got suspended for 3 days. There's several other accounts who were suspended. So there isn't really like free speech on
But do you
Twitter.
know
Do you know
why?
why they were
Yeah,
suspended?
so I think free speech is, yeah. So
Doesn't
so
mean
maybe
no
it's
one's
free.
going to get banned.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean,
so I'd.
stupidity is still a thing and will always be a
Yeah, and
thing,
violating
right?
the TOS is
If
also a
you're
thing.
getting
Like the
banned
certain
in the new
certain
Twitters,
kinds of
the
speech,
new Twitter atmosphere, I mean,
goes
it's
against
got
the
to be
law,
stupid,
right? It goes against the law. When a
right?
person
No,
harasses
he didn't.
somebody
It
else.
was nothing that went against the law.
But
I saw the tweet.
And
Yeah.
I
I would
would
also
also
add that,
add
that
that.
the rules are easy to manipulate. Currently, I don't know if you've been following this thread on a number of users who were suspended for calling out transgender activists. They were suspended. And a person, a trans activist, was bragging about abusing the rules by repeatedly reporting these accounts. I don't know if you followed it, but one of the Twitter's trust and safety people was in the thread saying that this will be dealt with and that they have been abusing these rules and in order to, they've been circumventing what Elon has put in place. And so moving forward, they're trying to train their moderators to make sure that these accounts, the ones that do these mass flagging campaigns will not be adhered to, and people who do manipulate the system the way that these transgender activists do will be suspended. And immediately afterwards, the accounts that they got suspended were reinstated, and those transgender activists were actually banned, permanently banned for violating this rule. So, it is a work in progress, I will say. It's not something that's going to happen overnight. This is a lot of people they have to train. There's like 1,000 moderators out there who, may be following the old rules. There may be bad actors within that group. We know this for a fact. Elon has confirmed it, that there are bad actors working at Twitter, and they will be dealt with. But, it's a work in progress. We can't just start saying, oh, there's no free speech on the platform because people are still being banned. Of course they're still being banned. Of course the rules are still being circumvented. But this is a work in progress and will be righted, right? Like, it's not something that's just going to happen overnight. It's unfair to say, oh, there's no free speech yet. It's like, so therefore it's a lost cause. It's obviously not a lost cause. If it
Catherine,
was,
the way I see it, to put it in a nutshell, compared to what we had before, we now have a way better situation. Medical experts can talk about science. They can criticize the vaccines. Where previously people who had an opinion that wasn't what the government wanted were just kicked off the platform or lost their jobs. And there are many, many different examples where Twitter has now opened up and allows these people to speak. For example, also about the Ukraine war. Look how the voice has changed of this war, right? Everyone used to have the Ukrainian flags. I don't see them anymore. I don't see, only pro-Ukrainian propaganda on Twitter. I see the other side being heard as well and raising valid points about this proxy war. There's so many improvements on Twitter. To say that it isn't perfect is fair because it's a work in progress, like Ian said, but the improvements are very visible, and I'm actually enjoying Twitter again.
Can I just
Here at
jump in there
GFL
very
AI
quickly?
Biz,
Yeah.
just 1 second.
So, just quickly, guys, I just want to ask you a question from the audience. By the way, Catherine, another thing to add as well, that you can still pay people to get someone's account banned. We had someone reach out to us a few days ago, and apparently Logan and Jake Paul, and he showed me messages. His account is Crypto King, and there's a whole story about them, and they paid to get his account suspended, which I think is still suspended. So the flaws are still there, and I think they'll remain there. But in terms of being freer, yes. But I would say like that's as close as we can get to free speech without breaking rules, and there's a lot of regulations to follow. I do want to ask a question to maybe kick it off with Kim and Ian. Is a few people in the audience are asking, like, do you see this impacting other social media platforms? We did have Mark Andreessen in the space before say other social media platforms, and he's on the board of Facebook, are watching the Twitter quote-unquote experiment closely. Do you think that we could see similar changes on those fronts?
Yes, because Twitter and Elon are opening a door here to the kind of truth that we have to expect at the other big tech companies as well. I mean, it's naive to think that this was only happening at Twitter, but not at Facebook and Google and the others. And I think what the big tech companies are most worried about with all of these releases is that court action will follow. There will be investigations into this. They will all have to answer questions to the new Congress, and it's going to get really, really hot for them. So, it's going to be quite interesting how they're going to behave in the future, because what's at stake for them is their market share in the social media space, right? The more people understand that the censorship has been going on, not just at Twitter, but at all big tech companies, they will be asking, well, what are you doing now to change that? How are you better than Twitter, or why shouldn't we all just move over to Twitter? So the pressure is definitely on.
And do you see this impacting? So with the files right now, we haven't seen much impact, but do you see, I want to ask that question to Tom as well. I'll try to ping him back in. Do you see anything, any repercussions from those Twitter files drop? The media's kind of ignored it. Any potential legal action against Twitter, for example?
Yeah, there are some AGs that have filed cases. The House is starting investigations into it. So, even with the mainstream media being relatively quiet about it, those who matter and who can take action are taking action. And I wouldn't be surprised if Elon himself is going to take some action. He's basically been lied to by Twitter shareholders and the Twitter board. None of this was known to him when he bought the company. So I think he has grounds to sue for a significant reduction of his purchase price and for damages. And he will probably participate in any of the hearings that are going on to provide more transparency. And all of that is just going to mount and mount and mount. And it doesn't matter that the mainstream media is not reporting it. People are still getting it through alternative sources. And these sources are growing significantly, by the way. Quarter after quarter, you just look at the numbers of engagement with these other companies. Look at the media companies, how they are losing viewers and readers and subscribers left, right, and center. So there's definitely a change happening here, and it's happening rapidly. And these companies that have participated in similar kind of censoring activities like Twitter, they will have to come clean, and they will have to make promises to their users, or else they're going to go down the drain.
Yeah, that's interesting. You recall one of the fights that Musk had prior to the purchase that led to that spate of litigation was he sought information on bots, which they refused to provide to his satisfaction. But I think more interestingly, from a public policy perspective, as we're now learning, was their censorship documents and how they were managing that. And they refused to provide virtually anything on that, as best I could tell. And that was one of the reasons he didn't want to go forward. So, I think there's a lot of the civil liability ramifications of this are pretty enormous, and certainly Musk probably has a lot of legal opportunities to pursue, as Kim suggests, if he so chooses. In the end, that's a business decision, right? And he may decide it's not good business just to get involved in litigation like this. But my gosh, this to me had a material impact on the value of the company, which is disclosing that they were colluding, perhaps illegally, with the government to censor Americans in violation of their terms of service, at odds with testimony to Congress, at odds with what they were telling shareholders at the time and potential purchasers like Musk. If we had an honest federal agencies, there'd be criminal investigations and other investigations into what Twitter knew, what Twitter was doing at that time, and what the other companies are doing now. But because it benefits Biden, the rule of law is thrown out the window.
If they actually went into litigation about this would be a benefit in terms of the purchase. Look at what it's done for his usership and viewership, not a damage.
Yeah, maybe.
The attention he'll get from litigation, you mean? Go ahead, Nelson.
Yeah, brother. I mean, listen, right? Here's what I believe. Elon's going against the grain, which is something that's never been done before by any of these social media companies, right? Especially due to the fear of repercussion, right? The U.S. government can make life difficult for any of these companies. I mean, look at what they're doing at TikTok, right? And these companies have investors, right? They have a board. They need to make money. They need to increase the valuation. They're scared. Look at the emails from the previous Twitter files with the executives once the senators started rambling, right? I mean, they were scared. They had to do something internally about the Russia stuff. Right. And, just going back to, the conversation with Kim, I mean, definitely understand where you guys are coming from. But I mean, in a TED conference in April, Elon did say that owning Twitter is not a way to make money. And he did say, I don't care about the economics at all. And in my opinion, that's why I believe he's going against the grain. Right. So this free speech, whatever narrative that, he's trying to push here, it benefits the people. It benefits us, right? The users start trusting Twitter more. But when it comes to the government, I mean, that's a completely different story. Everybody else, Zuckerberg and the rest of these guys, they're waiting to see what happens to Elon, right? If it backfires on Elon. And if it doesn't, I'm pretty sure that they're going to start, emulating the same thing as well. So, I mean, 100%. I mean, you guys are all correct, but I just wanted to throw that in there for sure.
I think Elon is taking a Fox News approach. When they started Fox News, I forget the gentleman's name that died now. The
Roger Ailes?
Yeah, Roger Ailes. He decided to go with the right. He decided because Murdoch wanted to be like all the other news networks. And Elon, I think, is being smart. He's doing this. Fox News is still the number one top cable news in the country. Okay, it beats out CNN, MSNBC, and all those other ones. So I think he's going to be successful, and I think Twitter's going to be very successful. And it's a play, and I see where he's going with it. But once again, he has taken an alienating. I think he's alienating a whole bunch of people that have used Twitter. Twitter became like, I would watch a fight and I would go to Twitter, and see what people were saying. If I watch something live, I want to see. It was like, having a bunch of friends in the living room. It's not that way no more. We got a bunch of people that's on the right that's here crying about, how they've been.
Are you, Jonathan? Are you seeing people from the left leave Twitter? Because I heard that people left and came back or said they were leaving, didn't really leave. Did you see that?
That too. That's what I saw. No, that's what I've seen. But even today, like when Tom was saying,
of the people who said, like a lot of people said they're going to leave, right? 250,000 people said they're going to leave. Only less than 0.5% of them actually left, and they went to Mastodon, which is according to recent reports, is an even worse place than Twitter when it comes to child sexual exploitation and all that stuff. It's kind of funny how NBC News publishes this article very recently, last week, claiming that Twitter, has not been dealing with the child sexual exploitation issue quite as much as they claim to have been, and yet they have completely neglected to talk about Mastodon's ongoing issue with pedophilia for years and years and years and years and years, and no one cares about it. Somehow it's just a weapon against Twitter, right? People only seem to care when it's about Twitter, but regardless of that's irrelevant, right, to what you're saying. But the point is, all these people who claim to have left to Mastodon, they're back here because they don't have an audience on these other websites. Look at George Takei, right? Like, he left Twitter supposedly to have a Mastodon account, and yeah, he's active there. But guess what? He's also active here. He hasn't left. None of these people are leaving. They just love to claim that they're leaving because it's like the virtual signaling thing to do. It's like, I'm leaving Twitter. Look at me. I'm such a brave crusader against Elon Musk. And it's like, no, you're not. You're still active on here because you can't get an audience elsewhere. Who gives a shit about Tumblr
How's
or
Mastodon?
Mastodon?
How's Mastodon and are they both? So Mastodon, you said, is doing shit. The metrics are shit. How's Truth doing? It's been there
It's
for a while.
garbage. It's garbage. It's like
It's
maxed out
garbage.
at like 4 million people, and those are just people who follow Donald Trump. No one uses it for anything else. It's an echo chamber. It's no fun there. It's just QAnon people posting boomer memes. It's not interesting. It's like, it's worse than Facebook in that regard. Nobody wants to use it.
Sort of what Twitter's becoming.
No, it's
No,
not.
it's
John,
not.
I mean,
Twitter's
like,
No,
not like that.
listen,
No,
I
this
that's
mean,
is a
absolutely
superior
bullshit.
Yes, it
platform.
the
is.
reason, bro.
That's
The
bullshit.
reason,
What did you say, Jonathan?
I said
Everyone
sort of what
disagreed.
Twitter's
He said
becoming.
Twitter's
Because here's the
becoming a
thing.
QAnon
Oh,
space. No, it's not. That's ridiculous. Like, there is so much pushback against QAnon nonsense over here that it's not a thing. Like, yeah, they do exist. Those people always exist. Any platform they go to, you're gonna find circles of leftists saying their own stupid bullshit. People on the far right saying the stupid bullshit. Doesn't matter, right? They're insular echo chambers. Doesn't really matter. But at least they're on Twitter. On Tumblr, on the other hand, you have all these fandoms still quarreling over nonsense no one cares about, and they're irrelevant. Nobody talks about this latest drama on Tumblr that just happened or this latest drama on Mastodon. Nobody cares about it. People are always reporting on Twitter. Look at what the young people are doing, right? It's either TikTok or Twitter. What are journalists writing about? Entertainment journalists, media journalists, people in the tech industry. They're all on Twitter. Something big happens, it happens on Twitter. Twitter knows about it before anybody else. If Jake Paul goes on some rampage against KSI or something, where is it happening? It's on Twitter. Logan Paul has drama recently, right? I don't know if you guys been following, but he's been alleged to have like scammed a bunch of people with some crypto thing. Where is that blowing up? It's blowing up on Twitter. You can't go to Tumblr for that. Nobody on Mastodon's talking about it. They're talking about it on Twitter. And guess what? All these websites, the CNN and NBC News and BuzzFeed, they'll be reporting on his tweets on Twitter and what people are saying to him on Twitter. Twitter is the center of attention, and it always will be.
yeah, and by the way, the other, just to put an exclamation point on that, I mean, it's far superior in its overall design from a tech perspective than anything Truth Social or any of the other ones are ever going to come to. Mastodon's just another way to do Discord, pretty much. And again, that's limited to who you can get to bring into your minimized space, and people will run to you if they want to. Here, you still have this dynamic. You can put something out there. People can engage with it. It can get expanded upon, which is happening more now. I mean, my engagement is just crazy. It's not just because of maybe being on a Twitter space. I'm just seeing engagement like crazy just on things that I post. This is the place people go to get information. That's why George Takei can't go over to Mastodon, because he can't. He doesn't even understand how to use it. This is a user friendly environment where people can actually engage and play around, and it's never going to change.
Ian, I have a question for you. We talked about the concerns in the concentration of power among social media platforms, but that concentration is still there with Elon. He's doing the right thing now, but let's say Elon sells it to someone else. The concentration of power is still there. So long term, do we have a solution? Like, Elon's doing the right thing now with Twitter, but what about in 20 years from now?
I think that's a bridge to cross when we arrive at it,
Yeah. Go ahead. I see your hand up. Nelson, go ahead, man.
Yeah, bro. I just, I'm not sure if you're trying to pivot, but I just wanted to add, if
No, bro.
anyone goes in their app store right now on your iPhones Twitter is the number one news app in the world right now. The number one most downloaded news app in the world right now. That's a big deal. So Twitter is rolling, it's steaming. No one's leaving the platform. It's steaming ahead. But the only thing is, the only entity that can put a dent to that is the government. So again, right? We need to wait and see what happens. We need to see if there's going to be any pushback towards Elon or Twitter. And, it's going to be an interesting 2023 for sure. But, I mean, that's the only entity that could slow this train down, in my opinion.
BJ Ditcher, go ahead, man.
Hey, brother. Just a couple of things. One on legacy media and on Twitter. So the first point, just for context, I was a spokesperson for the Canadian Trucker Convoy and did the media strategy for us. And one of the things I intentionally did was I banned publicly on Twitter legacy media. And I focused on alternative media. Post Millennial was invited to our pressers, Rebel News, National Telegraph, Epoch Times, you name it. And I knew, given the way corporate media works, all they were going to do is come in and call us names, and they weren't going to listen to us. And then they weren't going to get any views. So what's the point? Whereas I could go on Steven Crowder and Jordan Peterson and all these other alternative media platforms, and I knew I could target 100 million views in that first week, which we did, which is why it went global. And the legacy media was so angry when they showed up to my hotel, and there was about 200 of them in the lobby, and I sent one of our team down and said, here's the list of media that's allowed. Everybody else, tell them to go home. And you know what? It worked. So this is a good sign. And where has that evolved to? I've spoken to Dr. Peterson many times since the convoy. In a conversation we had in October, he was explaining to me that, we have in Canada, we had a leadership race going on in the Conservative Party. I don't want to get political here, but just as an example. And he said to me, you know what? Even people in politics now realize you were right. And they have allocated their entire budget for the next election to alternative media because legacy media is not going to give anybody a fair shake and they don't get the views. There's no credibility. So this is all good things. And this is why we have these spaces now where many of us probably 5 years ago would not have been talking to each other because we're on the opposite sides of the political spectrum. But here we are. We're now engaging because the legacy media has lost all credibility. And then the other quick thing on Twitter, yesterday I was posting a bunch of tweets, and all of a sudden a bunch of people started taking snapshots and showing me your tweets are being blocked again for whatever reason. It puts up the filter saying you cannot be seen. That's just growing pains, man. Maybe it's a software issue or whatever it is. He's trying to rebuild the company. It's going to take time. So we're all going to bump into these, glitches and bumps along the road. And we just got to be patient as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I mean,
Hope
and
that
more
helps.
to add to your point, look at what DeSantis' team is doing. The same thing. They're not inviting the legacy media. They're
Yep.
not doing interviews at the Washington Post, and the Washington Post is getting really mad about it. Wrote an article about how mad they were that DeSantis wouldn't give them the time of day. Instead, they gave us, Rebel News, the time of day. We got an exclusive interview with Ron DeSantis because they realize that they're not going to reach the audience they want through the Washington Post. They're going to reach it through social media. They're going to reach it through alternative influencers or just influencers in general because we're the ones talking to
And
the people. We're the ones reporting on the truth. We don't have this weird narrative that, that's just going to end up condemning DeSantis or condemning the Freedom Convoy. We just want to report about what's really happening because that's what the people want. They just want the truth, and people are
and
slowly realizing that.
and it's interesting you say that because after the convoy, after I got my cast off because I broke my ankle during the convoy, I went to speak at the Bitcoin conference about what we did with Bitcoin during the convoy. And some people from Mar-a-Lago wanted to meet with me. So I met with a bunch of them a number of times. And they work both on the, the Trump end of things, on the DeSantis end of things, and helping with fundraising or whatever. We spoke about exactly that. And I said to them, listen, look what we did in Canada. You don't need legacy media. Ignore it. Because if you ignore them, then they get angry. And once they get angry, then they start chasing you. And there was one other benefit, and then I'm going to shut up. I knew, I mean, Ian, you know how intellectual property works in journalism, right? I knew if they did not have the opportunity to sit down with us face to face in a media scrum, that would deny them of the intellectual property of their B-roll footage to constantly smear us every day like they did with January 6th. And it worked because now there was only one press conference where the legacy media snuck in, and that's the only footage they have. And the Post Millennial actually told me in one of the interviews, they said it was hysterical that when we were doing your interviews, your live streams, the legacy media had to come to our feed and log into our feed to report on it. So you know what? Just ignore them, move forward, and the truth will get out eventually, right?
So, guys, I think we've covered the files pretty well. Kim, Ian, what do you guys expect in the next drop? Like, we've seen it kind of escalate since the beginning, and the story shifted a bit. Initially, we started blaming Twitter, then now we started blaming the FBI. Now we've got senators involved. What do you expect in the next drop?
Kim, you want to go first?
Well, I don't know what the next drop is going to be. I just think, there's so much material. I wouldn't be surprised if we still get, quite a few more Twitter files. But even if we wouldn't, what is already out there is so powerful and is going to change things in a big way that most people can't really see right now. But when you look at what's going to happen with, House investigations, with some of the AGs already bringing cases against the government and the Democratic Party, and all the things that are the aftermath of this are already enough to bring significant change in the next couple of years. And I'm looking forward to whatever else Elon has to release, and also what he's going to do with Twitter. I think we're on a pretty good track here.
Okay, as for me,
Ian?
well, going by what Matt Taibbi suggested, this is part one of more drops. So there's going to be more Russiagate stuff coming soon. That's going to be very interesting. And as Kim himself said just now, this is going to lead to a lot of investigations. We've already seen this with Eric Schmidt's investigation into Twitter and the collusion with the federal government. We got a drop of Facebook files, so I recommend checking out Michael Schellenberger's Twitter feed, where he posted one of the files that was released by AG Eric Schmidt. That's part of the Missouri versus the Biden thing. Very interesting stuff. And moving forward, we're going to see the church style what do you call it, committee being formed in the House, right? And it's got some good people on board. It's got Thomas Massey in there, and we can trust that man to actually get to the bottom of things. So we're going to see more revelations here, and it's not just going to be from Twitter. This has opened up a whole can of worms that none of this would have been possible. There would not be a church style committee to investigate Biden or the three-letter agencies. None of this would be happening if it wasn't for Elon Musk, if it wasn't for him deciding to declassify all of this information that we're getting right now, right? So yeah, I know it's a bit slow, and you know what? It's better than just releasing everything at once, because we're not going to be able to trawl through all of it. There's a lot of stuff here to go through, and you do need eyes on it. Some things I would agree with a lot of the criticism that's been levied towards him, in that we need maybe larger teams of journalists walking in there and going through all of the Fauci files. I think that is very important, and that is something that I believe Barry Weiss and the rest of them are working on right now. It'd be nice to see it soon. But I would say be patient, and this stuff is a work in progress. It's developing, so don't lose heart. Don't think, oh, just because the media is not covering it, therefore it's irrelevant. It's absolutely relevant. You have to make it relevant. You have to keep talking about it. You have to keep focused on it, and just don't be disheartened. Just because CNN's not covering it doesn't mean it's irrelevant, because as BJ pointed out earlier, the media is going to come to it eventually, because they're going to have to talk about it. They can't keep hiding this, right? This is not something that they can contain. They no longer own the space. They no longer own journalism. Journalism belongs to the people. And this is at the heart of what journalism actually is, right? Journalism is about citizens speaking up and speaking the truth, and speaking truth to power. right? This is what journalism is supposed to be about. This is what it has always been about, and yet, it's been taken over, but no longer, right? Elon has given us this massive road forward, and it's up to us to walk down that path, right? And actually seek the truth. And so, thank you, Elon Musk, is what I would say.
And I think we should. We're getting a lot of people messaging us to cover the special counsel appointed to investigate Biden. So that could be an interesting topic for next month. How serious do you think that
Huge.
that appointment is?
As Tom said, it's going to be massive.
Well, anyone who has been appointed by the Biden DOJ as a special counsel is not going to do shit.
Yeah, unfortunately, but there is a reason why they appointed a special counsel, and it's not the AG investigating the case himself, right? And as Tom pointed out, Biden has essentially opened the door for these investigations to even happen to him because they took away the protections that Trump had, and now Biden is at the receiving end of it. This is brilliant. I think that Biden, the walls might actually be closing in on him. We'll have to see, right? We have to wait and see. But I have a good feeling.
Don't
I mean,
get your hopes up.
the only reason that I see why this could potentially become problematic for Biden is because the Democratic Party is fed up with him. They want to get rid of him. They don't want him to run again in 2024. The guy is a liability to the Democratic Party at this point.
Yeah, I think that they don't. No one really don't want to see him run in 2024. But guys, this is totally different than what happened to Trump. Biden's attorney immediately contacted the National Archive to pick up the documents. Trump had to be raided to get the documents.
You know why that is,
when we're
though,
looking
right,
at
Jonathan? It's because the
yeah,
House has been taken over
it's
by
the right thing to
Republicans.
do.
So even if they didn't do it, look, if they didn't do it, the House would come to them, and then they would be in serious trouble. They'd be in jeopardy for hiding these things. Now, if the Democrats actually won the House, there would be no such thing. No one would be talking about this right now. There would be no revelations whatsoever. They did this to hit the Republicans ahead of the past, right? To beat them to the punch, basically. That's what they did. That they're afraid. This thing really does hurt him.
But wait, Ian, I agree with you. But let me just say this right here. First and foremost, when you look at what's taking place here, once again, this is not. I mean, I'm not gonna call it a nothing burger because it is. But Biden did the right thing, and as a Democrat, I'm gonna tell you, I'm disappointed that they found this out before the election and waited to after the election. I'm not here proposing that there be two sets of rules. One for us and one for them. It should be one set of rules. Now, with that being said, there is a policy in place that the DOJ has in place where you don't say anything like 90 days before an election or something like that. You don't announce anything. So if that's what they're going off of, I can understand that. But as someone that is, I'm on the left. I don't know if you guys noticed that or not, but I tend to lean left. But
We definitely no way. Are you serious? I had no idea.
But with that being said, it put a nasty taste in my mouth when I realized that they waited not only until after the election, but after the new Congress was sworn in before they put this out there. Okay, so I'm not here booty clapping, as they would say, for Biden and this administration, but I will say that they did turn these documents over right away. They did not have, allegedly, they did not have to have a raid to go and get these documents. That's a big difference. So kudos for that.
Love it. All right, guys. I think we'll probably look into covering this in the next space. We've got a few people to invite to the panel. We were going to do a space on the CPI data today. I just don't think it's worth it. We've done this already, so we'll take a break. And tomorrow we've got another space on. I think Andrew Tate, Vice. Anyone listening, following the Andrew Tate story, Vice is dropping a documentary. Sam, you've been watching that documentary on Andrew Tate, no? The updates from Vice and the recordings.
Yeah. They've leaked one or two things, which I'm sure that Tate supporters won't be too happy with. But
it's pretty incriminating.
It's pretty incriminating.
Really incriminating. There's no defending this.
No, I agree. The documentary goes out tonight at 11 p.m. EST, so that's going to be the middle of the night for most of us. So I think we're scheduled for 2 p.m. tomorrow EST. Is that right, Marion?
I think so. Yeah, I'll tweet out the link. Cool. Yeah, all right, I'm off to have dinner. Go ahead, Kim.
Yep, I'm going to go eat.
Thing before we break this up. Stella Assange is in the room. She's listening. She has been listening for a while. And just a reminder, Julian Assange is still in jail. He shouldn't be in jail.
Agreed.
He has done great journalism. And just a reminder to everyone to redouble your efforts to support him. Thank you.
I agree.
Yep.
Thanks for the shout out, Kim and Stella. Welcome to kind of give updates on the story. Maybe in a few weeks' time. You're always welcome, and appreciate you being here. Thank you, everyone, for joining. See you for the next job. Love you all. Bye, everyone. And good to have you back, Kim.